The whole event starts 20 years ago, and we are told about a guy who was a mere mortal back then. Initially, he was supposed to have a simple life, but a mysterious man showed up in it and changed everything. After that meeting, he had tons of questions, but no answers. This mysterious man killed him, and after his death, he was reborn in another world. But when his life ended again, not only did he miraculously not die, but he also opened doors to another world through the spirit realm. He traveled through the 9 heavens, walking on an unknown road. The result of his travels is to reach the level of God. He had to fight a lot, even when the situation was not in his favor. But he didn't think he would have to die again. It was a challenge, he thought, for he was reborn again, and this time on Earth. He was reborn 20 years back into his past life. It was a chance to experience his life in a very different way. He decided that this time he would not waste his life. He would spend his life uncovering all the secrets that only he could find and learn. We are then told in more detail how he was killed. He was betrayed by his close friend Lu Xiaohong. He trusted him very much and never thought he could do such a thing. Lu Xiaohong was furious, for he dared to rise to the level of a god when Lu Xiaohong is at the bottom because of their friendship. He was lying on the floor in death, not saying anything. But he thought that Lu Xiaohong was a bad friend, because he should have been happy for him instead of killing him. Although Lu Xiaohong was furious, but it was still his friend, and in his heart he did not want to do it. But what's done is done. And so he swung his sword and then blood spurted. He died again, but this time he found himself in a previous life. As it happened, he was reborn in the heavenly realm, setting out anew on the path of perfection. From a mortal's point of view, the 9 heavens had fallen into chaos, punishing the gods, eliminating demons, and getting rid of all obstacles. He thought that in this life, he could improve his chi and ascend all the way to the end of the heavenly realm. However, it turned out the same as before. When he woke up after death, he was in space and felt that his spiritual core remained untouched. It turned out to be heaven's will. Afterward, his body began to glow, and it was as if he had passed into another world. He passed out again, and when he woke up, he was surprised. It was a very familiar place to him. After all, he saw brothels, high-rises, coffee shops, and then it dawned on him that he was on planet Earth. Looking around, he noticed that he was wearing the clothes he wore when he first died. Walked a little further and saw the place where he was killed. Then he noticed something firmly in his pants pocket. Taking it out, he decided to check the date. It was May 15th, 2019, 8 p.m. He returned to his previous life on Earth, 2 hours before his death. Here too, I began to rejoice that he was still alive. But still, he didn't realize what this divine light was that penetrated his body. On the other hand, it doesn't matter. What matters is whether he can take that chance. And when he began to meditate, he felt that his cultivation energy had been absorbed by divine light, and suddenly realized sharply that such pure and massive energy could only be a great celestial power. Despite losing the cultivation of the past, he had gained a mysterious and divine power. Also, his development is not high enough. He feels a lot of limitations on all his abilities. At this time, Lin Fei, that's the name of our protagonist, didn't realize that the cultivation conditions on Earth and in the heavenly realm were different. The cultivation method of the heavenly realm involves gathering chi and building and constructing a foundation, the golden realm, the spiritual core, the transformation of God. Each realm is divided into 3 levels. Each realm requires a huge amount of energy to maintain. Therefore, he set the first goal for himself, namely what he needed to cultivate at this moment. He also wondered how much stronger he was now than his former self. Since ancient times, spiritual energy was no longer useful for cultivators. They looked for another way to utilize the essence of heaven and earth, creating other Tao methods. Each cultivation realm is divided into 3 levels: the beginning, the middle, and the top. The realms of cultivators on earth are divided into spirit, dark, beginning, transformed, formless, ascended, and earthly. Ascended and earthly. Linjin cultivators are strong and fast. Zhuanjing cultivators can cover a distance of 100 steps in an instant. Xintian cultivators have unrivaled protection. Hushan cultivators can defeat hundreds of enemies. Wuxian cultivators can destroy enemies from the air. Shunjin cultivators can control the whole world. After breaking through to the realm of the Ascended Realm, cultivators enter the next form of existence, Ludixian. Since ancient times, no one had been able to reach this realm. At this time, Lin Fei was thinking about how he could try his best to remove the restrictions. But even more than that, he wanted to take revenge on Lu Xiao. But for that, he needs to recover. Suddenly his phone vibrated. It was a message from Mu Qing Cheng. She asked him to come home if he was not in trouble. Lin Fei had no choice but to go to her. As he approached the house, he was very glad to be back to his old carefree life. When he entered the house, he was immediately heard asking why he looked like a homeless man. After all, his clothes were very dirty and soiled. It was Mu Ching-chung. She was very pretty and seemingly cute. Lin Fei was a bit in a stupor upon seeing her, for no matter how much he had prepared himself to meet her, his senses had once again kicked in. Mu Ching-ching asked him again how his night was, but he still stood in a stupor and didn't say anything. She could see something was bothering him. She just hugged her husband. He gathered his thoughts and replied trivially that he had tripped and fallen. He ran away quickly, trying not to look at her. Realizing that he really stunk and all his clothes were filthy, he went to wash himself in the shower. Mu Qingcheng was a little offended at him, because she means she's worried and he doesn't even want to say anything. When he washed up, he more or less came to his senses, but he kept going over the memory. He remembered how he had ignored Mu Qingcheng, and set a goal for himself that he would not make the mistakes of the past, and also treat Mu Qingcheng the same way. But he was also tormented by the question of why that man had killed him, and why him specifically. When he was already drying himself off after showering, Mu Qingcheng knocked on the door. She brought him a new set since his past clothes are all dirty. He thanked her for her concern and she was very surprised at his behavior. After he got dressed, he hurried off on his errands and said he'd be back soon. Mu Qingcheng, where did he run like that tonight? Lin Fei told her not to worry and he would return quickly. She believed him and escorted him out. When he was walking in the evening, he thought about Mu Qingcheng. Unfortunately, he had been too cold to her before, and in the end, they didn't even have anything to talk about. His head was starting to hurt from piling on so much information, so he threw it all out and relaxed. As he was walking down the street, he heard some man yelling at someone on the phone. Lin Fei looked at him, only saying in his mind that he was here by his clothes. He had no taste. While discussing his clothes, he noticed that he had forgotten his wallet at home. He was already thinking about going home, but when he turned around he saw a girl running towards him, screaming for help. That girl saw Lin Fei and ran up to him, asking for help as she was being chased by rapists. A crowd of guys immediately ran up behind her, and the main one asked to give it to her at once, otherwise he would not be well. Lin Fei said that he didn't want any trouble, and this girl, at the same time that girl was very scared. After all, he was her one chance to fight off those rapists. He praised him, for he had done the sensible thing. While he was praising him, Lin Fei gave him a punch on the cheek. The guys in the back didn't see it coming either. Lin Fei said that he wasn't a scum like them and that he was about to teach them a lesson. The one in charge stood up and swung his fist at him as well. His kick was stopped by someone else with his own foot, and then he punched him in the eye. It was the same guy who was talking loudly on the phone. The head of that company only smiled evilly at another suicide bomber. Having received, as it were, many blows, he ordered his two subjects to seize them and beat them. This man and the kid from the rapist group took a swing at each other. Man manages to ball his fist away and attacked him in the chest. The second one was just approaching him, and already he had been hit in the stomach with a U-turn. The man in charge, realizing that his men were useless trash, threw a punch right in the chest. The man spat blood and flew off to the side, and that chief only smiled evilly because he had managed to defeat someone at least. This girl immediately ran up to him with help. This man's name was Wang Ziming, and he was familiar with this girl, so he jumped into the fray. Wang Ziming told the girl to run as fast and far away as possible, for he was no longer able to protect her. And in a moment, everyone heard clapping. It was Lin Fei. He was watching it all without doing anything, and he even praised everyone for such a wonderful performance, and especially praised Wang Ziming and said he should be given an Oscar for such a role in this performance. The girl immediately started yelling at him at Lin Fei. That one not only doesn't help, but also mocks everyone. This didn't even please the person in charge, and to him, this girl was already in the background. Not the first plan was to beat up Lin Fei. He ordered his boys to knock his teeth out, sparing no effort. He dodged the first fist very easily, advising him to train that one's speed. He didn't like Lin Fei's words, and started to throw a second punch immediately, but Lin Fei stopped him by hitting his chest with his knee. The second fatty also ran up to him, but before he could even take a swing, Lin Fei had already knocked him out with his head. Looking at the two scum, he realized that nothing had changed with this world while he was traveling to other worlds. Then he looked at Wang Ziming and said that he hated scum like him. Wang Ziming and the girl didn't understand what he was talking about. Especially the girl, she was afraid that he might beat Wang Ziming, so she became the front, thus covering the man. Lin Fei walked as if he was walking through to Wang Ziming's side. The girl didn't even have time to notice when he passed her. Lin Fei walked over to Wang Ziming and pressed his hand with his sneakers. Realizing that the girl still didn't understand what was happening, he began to explain it. Namely, that there was a cheap scam. Wang Ziming hired these thugs and pretended to save her. The man immediately shouted. Ying Shui, which was the girl's name, did not listen to him and ran away because he was trying to deceive her. Ying Shui became stunned and couldn't completely believe that Wang Ziming could do this to her. Lin Fei next asked the person in charge from that companionship if he was assuming correctly. The one didn't answer anything, and then he said that since he didn't know him, he obviously wouldn't mind if Wang Ziming's arm broke by accident, so he took his hand and began to clasp it. Wang Ziming immediately started screaming in pain and also ordered his men to take him out as soon as possible. And when the latter finally confessed, Lin Fei let go of his hand. Ying Shu heard this and cried, for she knew and trusted him, and he only wanted to take advantage of her. Wang Ziming immediately started stopping her and excused himself that it was just a misunderstanding, and there were thugs in the back who didn't know what to do. And then they decided that since they had already been paid, they could get out of here. Lin Fei heard that these guys wanted to wash out, so he decided to teach them a lesson for the end. After a couple seconds and loud noises, everyone was already on the floor, and that man still went after Ying Shui and asked her to forgive him and let him listen to him. But she didn't even want to hear or see him. When Lin Fei was already approaching the house, he saw a strange picture. There was a flower courier standing there, asking her to sign for this bouquet of roses. He of course asked who the sender was, for how could he not be her husband? But Mu Qingcheng only smiled and asked if he was jealous. Lin Fei of course said that he wasn't jealous, and simply changed the subject to a bee sitting on those flowers. This really scared Mu Qingcheng, but she didn't understand where the roses got bees from. After all, roses have no nectaries and few fingers. Lin Fei looked at the bouquet and smelled something amiss. So he left the house again, even though Mu Qingcheng had asked him to go inside and not go anywhere. In fact, in this bouquet of flowers, there was spirit energy. It was so weak that Lin Fei could barely detect it, but it was still there. It turns out that there are people who cultivate in this world as well. Walking outside, he began to remember exactly how he'd been killed. He was walking in the crowd, and then Mu Qingcheng texted him to go home. Walking home, he accidentally caught a man's shoulder. He apologized, and the guy said he had no problem. That was his mystery killer. The one pulled out a knife and shouted to him, "Leave your life forever!" He also said that King Yama wants him to die at 3, but he dares him to live until 5. Lin Fei was very scared and in a stupor, but when he started to approach, Lin Fei started to run. He reassured himself that he was on the main street and he would just call the police. But as he ran in the opposite direction of the killer, he hit a wall of some kind. It was a barrier made of aura. Because of that, other people couldn't see it, nor hear it. This mysterious man didn't even approach him, he just threw a knife at him. And it hit him right in the back, causing Lin Fei to bleed from his mouth as well as his back. Then this mysterious man deactivated this aura barrier and mingled with the crowd. And when the crowd saw Lin Fei lying on the floor, they immediately ran over to help him. At first, they thought that he had just fainted, but coming closer they saw a knife sticking out in his back. Lin Fei quietly closed his eyes from the lack of blood and watched his killer leave, and only after a couple of minutes his eyes went dark and blurred, and he could hear them trying to call the police and the ambulance. When he remembered it all, he felt a shiver run through his body. And he also had a question if his death was related to Mu Qingcheng, and if she knew anything about it. Walking home, he realized that that man knew how to generate barriers. Which means it's a big clan. Just who needs to spend so much energy to kill an ordinary person? He put all the puzzles together in his head, and also realized that on May 30th, if Mu Qingcheng hadn't reminded him, he wouldn't have remembered. That day, Lin Fei himself slept peacefully on his bed and didn't touch anyone. Suddenly, at 8 o'clock, Mu Qingcheng flew into Mu Qingcheng's room and started waking him up, asking him if he had forgotten what day it was. He was very sleepy, and blurted out that it was their anniversary day. Mu Qingcheng was angry with him because he had forgotten the most important thing, namely that they had only been married for 10 days and an anniversary was out of the question. In fact, he had to go to school then. Lin Fei of course got up after such a rowdy morning. But the previous semester had already passed, and he didn't understand why he had to shout so loudly. Still, going back there and checking things out isn't such a bad idea. As I was walking down the street, I saw some grandfather practicing. He saw it, and it was all like a chi cultivator. Lin Fei walked up to the old man and saluted him. The old man of course also pop-greeted, and asked why such a young man was interested in practicing the art of Tai Chi. Lin Fei replied that he knew something about it, so that was why he was interested. The old man was surprised, as young people practicing the art of Tai Chi is quite scarce these days, and asked what exactly he knew about it. He didn't really know much, But even that's enough to say that his Tai Chi style is a little different from what he's seen, and it's like he's missing something. The old man replied that he had been practicing the art of Tai Chi for over 10 years, and no one had ever dared to make such a claim against him. The principles of Tai Chi is about breathing, after all. It carries spiritual energy. But the spiritual chi of the old man was blocked. The old man only laughed in response. After all, young people these days don't understand how the world really works at all. Lin Fei looked at the old man, not really wanting to castrate him, but his injuries had already blocked all 8 special meridians for him. In this life, he had already reached his limit. The old man didn't reply anything and just remained silent. Lin Fei was a little pissed off, so he left. If he didn't want to be listened to, then what was the point of telling him anything? As he started to walk away, the old man quickly reached in his direction. He wanted to hit him, but Lin Fei grabbed his hand in a split second and threw him to the side. But the old man managed to get to his feet. There were guards behind him, and they were about to deal with him, but the old man stopped them. As he only now noticed that this guy was a cultivator, but this young man still needed practice, and no matter how well Lin Fei knew martial arts, he was still an ordinary person. Lin Fei only smiled and asked him to take a closer look. His body began to coil with fire. The old man couldn't believe his eyes, and then he was thrown back by Lin Fei's even greater strength. 3 guards immediately jumped on him. The old man stopped them again, saying he was fine. At that, they both looked into each other's eyes. Lin Fei moved his foot slightly, and a small hole formed there. And when he saw the guards jumping at him, he simply spat out more power, making the guards fly away as well as the old man. Everyone around him immediately realized that he had a sphere of development. The old man did not realize at his age, Gen Qi projection was possible. Lin Fei heard the guards say that he had some sort of development sphere, and he interrogated him to see if he meant the black sphere. Realizing that the child was a very mysterious and interesting character, he decided to introduce himself. His name is Chu Hao Tian, and he immediately started apologizing that he didn't mean to offend him in any way or hurt him with words. In response, as befitting, he also introduced himself. Chu Hao Tian called him the most manly of all men, and his name sounded more prestigious than the others. Lin Fei didn't understand what the old man was getting at. Chu Hao Tian explained to him that if he didn't know the basics, then he wouldn't be able to exert himself to his maximum. Seeing the bewilderment on his face, he really doesn't know about cultivation levels. Lin Fei thought about it and assumed that the cultivation on Earth was very different from the one in the heavenly realm, and it was because of that his previous cultivation here was limited. He told the old man his master had taught him reclamation since he was a child, but he had never told him about the theory. There is a triangle of sphere levels. Its first level is the sphere of spirituality. The second level is the sphere of development. The third level is the sphere of beginnings. The fourth level is the sphere of transformation. The fifth level is the sphere of formlessness. And the last highest level is the sphere of ascension. There is nothing complicated in understanding the levels of cultivation. They both cultivate their innate qi, and for that, they are called cultivators. There are 6 major realms in cultivation, each of which is divided into 3 minor levels: basic, intermediate, and highest. Lin Fei was shocked and scared at the same time, because it looked like he would have to reach the immortality sphere level on Earth in order to return to the celestial realm and take revenge. Therefore, he asked the old man if this elder knew what level of sphere he was currently at. Chu Hao Tian looked at his qi. In his opinion, he suggested that being at the basic level of the development realm. It turns out that his 4th cultivation layer in the celestial realm is equal to the basic level of cultivation on Earth. He also assumed that reaching the beginning realm and then the transformation realm would not be so difficult. The old man was still astonished after all. Lin Fei possessed the cultivation qi of the beginning realm being only at the level of the development realm. To him, this was astonishing. Of his 3 bodyguards, 2 are at the highest level of the spirituality realm, and only 1 level below Lin Fei. And the 3rd is at the basic level of the realm, just like Lin Fei. They are some of the best cultivators in Zhangbei City, but they couldn't even withstand 1 hit from Lin Fei. The old man can't stop admiring him. Lin Fei speculated again, whether it could be influenced by the fact that he had originally started training with the spiritual qi in the heaven realm, which was much stronger than the innate qi on Earth. The old man didn't want to demand an answer from him after all. It was a secret after all. He only hoped that Lin Fei would accept the invitation to join the Chu family. He wanted to tell the family about it already, but Lin Fei interrupted him. He said that he didn't need any faction. For now, he doesn't know how many and which cultivators in Zhangbei City belong to the Chu family's faction. Until he finds out the information about it, he won't make such hasty decisions. Shu Haotian asked Lin Fei not to refuse so easily, and then showed him one of the two greatest treasures of the Chu family. It would be the melting spirit jade. One of the greatest cultivation tools. In the heaven realm, it increases the speed of cultivation. When Lin Fei saw the melting spirit jade, he was pleased and surprised. After all, it meant that there were such treasures on Earth as well. Lin Fei took it in his hands, and now he could quickly merge with the great emperor's energy. Then he asked Elder Chu, if he can get such a precious treasure, then it turns out that their faction has more powerful cultivators than Lin Fei. So why is he so insistent on Lin Fei joining them? The old man looked at him and decided to tell him the truth after all. In recent times, there are fewer and fewer strong cultivators, and there are simply no more cultivators of the transformation realm. So there are only cultivators of the beginning realm left in Zhangbei. However, right now, the Chu family didn't have a single cultivator of the realm of endeavor to support them, and such a large family business without support would be like a fish on a chopping board. But as Elder Chu said, Lin Fei was only at the basic level of the cultivation realm right now, and he couldn't help them at the moment. The old man reassured him and said that with Lin Fei's talent and the resources of the Chu family, reaching the realm of initiation was only a matter of time. As for the transformation realm, it was also not impossible. For Lin Fei, the offer was certainly tempting, but as he had said before, he wasn't going to join any faction. The old man interrupted him and told him to forget about it, since he had other plans. The old man would no longer insist on joining, and he could keep this jade as a token of our friendship. When the old man got into his car, the guards immediately began to ask him about the jade, because it was given to the old man for his recovery. And the fact that the jade is now in the kid's possession, the Zong family will surely investigate the matter. The old man only laughed after all. The Zong family didn't give him this jade to help him recover. They just want to charge him more money while he is still alive. Besides, right now, the Zong family already has a lot of problems without this. They can no longer protect the Chu family in Jinbei. And it comes out that with this situation, the Chu family won't be able to protect this piece of jade. The guard said with surprise that in his opinion, giving this jade to a child was not the best option. And it wouldn't stop some family from taking it away from him. But old man Chu Haotian calmed down, suggesting that this kid's master was strong enough to challenge their family. So it would be good for someone to test his strength before theirs. At this time, Lin Fei rejoiced at the old man's gift, for this melting spirit jade would make cultivation much easier. Now it seems like he owed him a debt. At this, he also gave him a black card, but Lin Fei didn't understand what for. After a while, he finally reached Zhangbei University. After 10 years in the celestial realm, he would never have thought that he would return to such a familiar place. As he was entering the university campus, he heard someone calling him from behind. There was a group of 3 boys and 1 girl. They shouted at him, "I didn't think you had the balls to go back to campus!" And when he saw the girl, he began to reminisce again. It was Chin Chin whom he loved, but she did not reciprocate. Then he remembered the last time he had met her, when he had run after her, but she had told him to leave her and not to look for her again. The tallest guy, his name was Chi, came up to him and told him not to even think about Chin Ching since she was already his girlfriend. But Lin Fei reacted surprisingly calmly. He removed his hand from his shoulder and reminded him that he had allowed him to date her. In this way, he made this kid very angry. He looked at him with great rage and anger, but did nothing. He realized that he was still pretending to be indifferent. But in reality, he was quite different. But he couldn't just leave. He wanted to show him reality and take away his indifference. So he called him that day to the graduation party. His guys immediately started to discourage him to take Lin Fei with him. But the latter wouldn't even listen. Realizing that their boss couldn't be persuaded, the boys began to explain to him that they were going to a high-level club, and his tens of thousands of dollars worth of clothes were no good at all. One of the boys said that he would take Lin Fei's clothes for himself. Next, Chin Chin's girlfriend came up to him and told him that there would be many celebrities at this party. And if he came, it might help in the future. Lin Fei understood her good intentions, but wanted to refuse. At that moment, Chi interrupted him, saying that they were all going to the #1 favorite place in Cyan Bay, namely Heaven on Earth. He invited him to the hotel restaurant with him, if he had the courage to come. Lin Fei is the kind of person who likes free food the most. so if someone invites him and he has no reason to refuse, he will willingly go. Chi, getting into the car, said that he would reap him in Ting Yage's room, in heaven on earth. In the depths of his heart, he hoped that he would come after all. In the evening, Lin Fei still came to this paradise on earth, and he didn't understand how this hotel restaurant was different from the mansion, for it was very big and beautiful. When he entered this hotel restaurant, he was immediately greeted by the staff as president. Lin Fei approached the front desk. Then he was asked whether he had a reservation or not. Of course, he said the room was the Tin Yage room to which Chi had been invited. But the concierge asked for an invitation card. Chi Shang didn't say anything about an invitation card. At this time, a couple in love, their guards, walked in behind him. It was Li Shixuan, the second son of the Li family from the top 4 landowning families in Qianbei, and also his girlfriend Fei Xuan. She was the biggest shareholder in Qianbei. The concierge was immediately ordered to escort them inside, without even looking at their documents, for they knew that they were very important people. Lin Fei immediately wondered why they didn't need invitation cards. Li Shixuan heard this, and said that he was a VIP of the Chu Corporation, and that of course there was no need to book anything. But Fei Xuan was not very happy to meet. She thought it was some vagrant, and asked her boyfriend that now anyone who wants can enter this hotel. Li Shixuan calmed her down, and told her not to pay attention to any strangers, and said, "Old king, old rules." At the same time, Li Shixuan handed the concierge some strange black card, then switched back to Lin Fei, and asked him to leave since he didn't have an invitation card. But seeing Li Shixuan's map, he thought that his new map that the old man had given him would help here. The concierge, hearing that he was about to get a Kakuta, at first got angry with him, because that little kid was only compensating for his brains. But he was very surprised when Lin Fei took out the Chu Corporation's Black Premium VIP card. Li Shixuan and Fei Xuan hadn't gone far yet, and when they heard the concierge shouting in surprise, they turned around to look. And when they saw that kid had a Chu Corporation Premium VIP card, they were also shocked. Li Shixuan laughed lightly at his girlfriend, for she had underestimated this Lin Fei. This Supreme Black VIP card Master Chu didn't even give him. The concierge immediately began to apologize for such behavior in front of such an expensive guest, and Lin Fei felt uncomfortable and tried to calm him down. At this time, everyone in Tinyaju's room was already shouting and cheering, and some were also drunk. At that time, Qi Shan was just talking to another kid about business. When Lin Fei walked to the door of this room, he heard people discussing and laughing at him. Namely, that this redneck didn't dare to pass through, or was stopped at the entrance. It was only then that Qi Shan remembered that he had invited Lin Fei but had forgotten to give him the invitation card. After saying that, Lin Fei dared to enter the room, even though he realized that he wouldn't be welcome there, and he didn't really want to go there. He walked right up to Qi Shan and put his hand on his shoulder, saying, "I'm late." Qi Shan didn't think that this boy would dare to come. He immediately devised a punishment for him for being late, namely to knock it out with him. Lin Fei then told them that he agreed, but he didn't want to drink. So I took a bottle of wine, and I threw it against the wall. Qi Shan was furious at what he had done. The wine was worth 20,000, and he was sure he couldn't repay it. The concierge intervened in their conversation, and said that this hotel was willing to reimburse all his losses for Mr. Lin Fei. Qi Shan refused, because there is no need for it. He knows that heaven on earth belongs to the Chu Corporation, and his Qi family can't allow offenses, but still was offended by him, and said that this guy is interfering with their dinner, and asked him to escort him out. Qi Shan was similarly supported by his guys, adding that he didn't have an invitation card, and they suspected that he had snuck in there with evil intentions. The concierge only smiled and apologized, and explained to them that because of Lin Fei's status, he didn't have enough power to kick him out. Qi Shan was even more furious. After all, he didn't understand what the status of that bastard from the university could be about, and started threatening the concierge that because of such a petty matter, he would have to call the general manager. But the concierge again explained that they're well aware of who Mr. Lin is, and if he calls the general manager, even he won't be able to help kick him out, since he has less power too. Suddenly, their conversations were interrupted by a loud cry for help from the hallway. They immediately thought of Qin Qing, because she had just gone to the restroom. When they ran up to her, they saw a crowd of people holding her hand, and she was screaming for them to let her go. Qi Shan immediately rushed to Qin Qing's defense. After all, she was his girlfriend. The crowd turned to look at Qi Shan, and nearly ready to kill him right there. Qi Shan reiterated again for those to let Qin Qing go immediately, or else it would be very bad for them. The chief of that crowd, Lei Bao, introduced himself and also began to intimidate from, saying that it had been so long since he had hit people that every passerby now dared to teach him a lesson. Qi Shan stood in a stupor, sweat beading from his forehead when he heard Lei Bao's name. He decided to ask again and make sure there was no mistake. But Lei Bao didn't continue to listen to him and punched him in the chest, and also confirmed that he was the one. Qi Shan Pro slid on the floor from such a strong blow and began to beg for forgiveness from this type. His guys were in the same state. They were also in a stupor, and sweat was dripping from their foreheads. After all, they knew that if they insulted or hurt Lei Bao in any way, it would be the end of the Qi family. Lei Bao was the son of Lei Lon, the boss of the biggest triad in Qianbei City. Lin Fei stood at the back of the crowd watching. This all was a bit dumbfounded that a big and sturdy kid like Qi Shan would apologize to some kid. Suddenly from the crowd someone called out to Lin Fei. He was wondering why he was also participating in this circus. Lei Bao called him over and ordered him to obey him, or else he would break his arms and legs. The concierge, seeing all this mess, immediately ran to the general manager to calm everyone down and solve everything. At this time, Lin Fei was unfazed, for he didn't want to interfere. But since they found him on their own, it was fate. After a couple minutes, the concierge returned with 2 guards and immediately ran up to Lin Fei, for he was their VIP person. But going closer, saw a completely battered face from Lei Bao, who immediately started yelling at the staff and for them to bring him the bastard. The concierge looked him in the eye with a very serious face and explained to him that Mr. Lin was an important high-level person in the Chu Corporation, and that this was not someone he could offend like this easily. The whole crowd around were very surprised, especially his classmates who thought he was a trash bastard, and turned out to be an important person in the Chu family corporation. Just like that, Qin Qing was also surprised that his boyfriend was like a wimp apologizing on his knees, and her ex could be said to have avenged her. Lei Bao realized that this was a foreign territory to him, and he wouldn't be able to defeat him, so he just left. At the same time, he said to remember him, but when he turned around to look him in the eye and intimidate him, he was gone. At this time, Lin Fei had left through the corridors to a completely different place, with not even a scratch on his body. As he walked down the corridors, he felt a very, very familiar aura. When he opened some door, he saw the same mysterious man who had killed him, and there was a corpse lying at his feet. He was talking on the phone about the Sheng family, and then he overheard a phrase like, "In the beginning, Lin Fei was also my hand." After talking, he went out through another door, and Lin Fei was already standing behind the wall, watching where he would go. He didn't think he'd see that scarred face so soon. He continued to follow him further, and I saw myself getting into a Land Rover. When that one started driving, Lin Fei quickly climbed into the cab, and immediately ordered him to follow that white Land Rover. A few minutes later, the driver of this mysterious killer flagged down that they were being tailed and reported back to him. The mysterious assassin thought it must be the family of the hidden world who overestimated their capabilities. He said not to worry and to keep driving. At this time, Lei Bao ordered his subjects to find out who did it within 3 days, and also he wants to know absolutely everything about this bully. This subject interrupted him, saying that this kid was being covered up by the Chu family. As soon as Lei Bao heard about the Chu family, he became angry in a second and slapped him for saying that. He explained to his subject that this is a gas processing family, and there is a patron behind his Lei family, and that is enough to bring down the Chu family. He called his father and asked about the Chu family, namely that whether these people really had such strength, and couldn't he become a gas refiner. After talking to his father for a few minutes, he was over the moon and was looking forward to revenge on this bully. At this time, Lin Fei arrived at Mount Wulin. It was his first time there, so I started looking around, and after a few minutes I saw 2 men in brown, and one of them was the killer. At that time, he still didn't understand why this type and his men had come to Mount Wulin, which was in a wasteland.
At that moment, the assassin Lin Fei instructed his men to put away the tail. He would leave, for he had more things to do.
Lin Fei advanced behind them and one moment lost them. After walking a couple steps, a man called out to him from where he was sitting in a tree. Lin Fei was surprised how this type of person had gotten behind his back so quickly. That strange type pushed off from the tree and quickly flew towards him with his sword. But Lin Fei managed to dodge the blow, and it only made a huge dent on the ground. That man immediately praised Lin Fei, like he was fast and skillful and brave for daring to come and sniff out their secrets. He also said that families from the hidden world should not think that they don't know their schemes. But he decided to convince his family that his death would not be in vain. Lin Fei began to gather all the thoughts in his head and remembered that his assassin mentioned was the Sheng family. So he answered that he was from the Sheng family. That man immediately hid his sword and asked why. He was chasing them instead of preparing to join them. He replied that he wanted to ask something of the scarred man, meaning his assassin. The kid didn't like this type of guy, so without pulling out his knife, his fist started to burn like a blue flame. In a fraction of a second, his fist swept over Lin Fei's body, only damaging his clothes as he was able to dodge a little. Lin Fei saw his strength and speed, realizing that he was clearly of a high level. Missing, he attacked him again with his powerful fist. This time, he managed to hit it, and it flew off to the side, but it didn't quite damage him, because he managed to put a block in front of his body, thus saving himself from a quick death. His mouth was bleeding, and he quickly pulled himself together. He wiped the blood off and started to come up with a plan. After all, just fighting a dude without a plan, who was 2 levels above you, was a guaranteed loss. Especially in his condition, even with a spiritual blessing, it would be hard to win. The one approached him with his dagger and advised him to surrender. Lin Fei, of course, was not going to give up, so using the power of the jade, he struck his fist at him. He missed and hit the ground, making a big hole there. The kid praised him again, for if that one had no common communication with the families of the hidden realm, he almost scared him. While Lin Fei was assessing the situation, that kid flew at him with a dagger with great speed. At this moment, Lin Fei's jade rose into the air and began to glow. Then it pushed the kid a great distance away, and into Lin Fei's head went as if a beam, who gave him new powers. For a split second, he saw the man in red chained to the rocks, with fire burning around him. And then his chains began to seem to fly apart, letting him know that he now had a new power. It was the Supreme Emperor, and he released him. And a second later, a thunderstorm came out of the sky and hit that kid. After that blow, he was very exhausted. He didn't know how many people were standing behind the scarred master, so the best option then was to leave first. When he reached home, he decided to meditate, thus recovering his strength. When Lin Fei started meditating, he felt that his Supreme Emperor aura in his body was connected to the chi of this world. This was the reason why practicing perfection went much faster. But he also wondered, if he had 2 powers there that couldn't exist together, would he be able to perfect on Earth? He will be able to, only now. This spiritual power is being infused into the jade. So, spiritual energy gives birth to new abilities. Of course, as long as the jade works. The Supreme Emperor's spirit and chi energy would remove the restrictions so that he could use it. Next, he began to sit, meditating with his eyes closed and in deep thoughtfulness, calmly contemplating God, gritting his teeth, taking hold of Kunlun with both hands. When he opened his eyes, but he felt anew into himself. And then he realized that he had finally reached the covered kingdom. With the power of milking perfection to break the far frontier, perhaps he should fear nothing more. The only unfortunate thing is that he won't be able to recover sooner after connecting with the jade to free the Supreme Emperor from his chains. Unexpectedly, he overcame one boundary with the help of the jade, but it shatters in an instant. Without a medium-strength weapon that can combine aura and innate strength, he won't be able to practice it anymore. So he has no choice but to ask the Cultivator family. When he entered the living room, he saw Mu Qingcheng, who had fallen asleep on the sofa. He wanted to walk past quietly without waking her, but he noticed a piece of paper in her hands. He was interested in it, so he decided to read the note. It said, "Dear Mu Qingcheng, her family is going through a difficult time. You need to find the blood of a 500-year-old Reisha. Heaven and earth." Reciting this leaf, he wanted to pass it by as he always did, but his conscience wouldn't let him. He had decided firmly for himself that his past life was completely indifferent to him, and it was time to make up for lost time. So he started with this note. So he took a cab to a certain Yunwu Shang Street. When he got out of the cab, he was confused because the address clearly said Yunwu House number 58. That's why he couldn't find it. While Lin Fei was walking and looking for the house he wanted, he saw a strange black and fully tinted minibus that stopped abruptly not far from him. A few seconds later, the men in black threw the man off that bus. Because it wasn't the first time he'd come in uninvited. And then when they left, they threatened to break all his ribs if it happened again. This person was a little beaten up, so he started to clean himself up. At this moment, Lin Fei walked up to him. The one asked where the house number 58 Yun Wu's house was located. This kid knew what this place was, namely the Fog House. Lin Fei, upon hearing the happy news to him, shook his hand to stand up and asked him to show him the way to this misty house. He had no problem agreeing, and started telling me more and more about the place. Misty House is not the safest place for a person to be. Lin Fei realized what he was implying and transferred some strength to him through handshakes, thus showing that he was a cultivator. That kid was reading and was stunned, because it wasn't every day that one met a cultivator. They both introduced themselves, and his name is Lo Ying, and asked him to follow him to the Misty House. When they got closer to the house in 58th Lane, Lo Ying began to talk more and more about this house. In fact, this house has no fixed location. It was named so because it is near the 58th lantern of this alley. The main lantern serves as the fog house. Lin Fei conclusively asked how to use this main lantern. Li Ying explained to him that the easiest way was to influence the external methods and then ignite it. And the farther they go, the brighter they burn. And the house is headed that way too. Lin Fei realized that it was long and boring to set all 58 lanterns on fire. So he activated his power, and his fist began to be padded with fire. In an instant, he swung that hand and all the lights came on. Lo Ying had never seen such a thing before, and was more excited than ever. After a while, a driver in a very luxurious car pulled up to him as they lit the right light. It turned out that Yun Hong had personally nailed down to escort them. After all, Lin Fei was a VIP. But Lin Fei liked Luo Ying already and wanted to take him with him. Yun Hong of course said that it was possible, but only if the VIP herself wanted it. Luo Ying was very happy and also very admiring that Lin Fei was a VIP. When they both sat in the back row, they were blindfolded. They immediately asked why they had to be blindfolded at all, but Yun Hong contradicted them and explained that it was a normal rule of the Misty House to not reveal his position to any strangers. They rushed with great speed to that very house. At this time, very strange things were happening in the bamboo grove of Mount Zulin. There was a master grandfather who was somewhere around level 6, and at his feet was a corpse that apparently he had defeated. That corpse was still conscious, though he was all over his cowlick. He thought he couldn't be killed in this world. Then that grandfather faintly heard Lin Fei's aura, roughly to the north of him. Yai immediately rushed to a tall tree to plot a route for himself. It didn't matter to him where Lin Fei ran off to, because he was sure that he would find him very soon. Lin Fei didn't suspect anything at the time. He had just arrived at the Cloud House with his new friend Luo Ying. The mountain was completely covered in clouds and fog, but it looked nice, even beautiful. Luo Ying had never been to this house. He had only heard about it from some people, but now he could see the Cloud House for himself. Yun Hong, when he brought them over, only asked him to give him the invitations to inform Miss Yun San of their arrival. Luo Ying stood behind him and was puzzled, as he was still wondering which cultivator family he was from, since he had so much power. Lin Fei was thinking about the invitation that Yun Hong had said, because Mu Qingcheng's letter didn't say anything about an invitation. Yun Hong realizes that they cannot enter the house uninvited. However, it had been a long time since he had seen such a young man who could light 35 lanterns. So he said for those to take a walk here, since such a young Mr. Lin Fei, there was no invitation. At this moment, he will inform Miss Yun San to make a decision. They decided to walk under some wooden canopies, and at this moment, they were discussing the millet treasure that was at this auction. Lin Fei thought it was about a 500-year-old reishi cow. Luo Ying's voice became surprised. He began to explain to Lin Fei that it was a very valuable item in this world. Apart from the Chu family, almost all the families in Jiebei had come for it, and getting it would not be a real task. But their conversation was interrupted by some men with the words, "Lo In, you seem to be taking my words for granted." When they turned around, they saw Timin who had shouted this to them, as well as the other guards of the Misty House. Luo Ying was very scared, and asked what they wanted him to do. And since they had promised that if they saw him again they would break his arm, they would not be dissuaded from their words. But then he remembered it wasn't so bad after all. So he told the guards that Yun Hong would personally intercede for him, and it would be better for them not to get involved. They first asked if Yun Hun was the one they were talking about. He explained that his friend Lin Fei was a VIP customer, and he had brought him along. Therefore, he had every right to be here. In response, they only laughed at them. Timing then instructed his 3 guys to show the power of their blades to the Misty House spiritual serpent. They threw 3 daggers in their direction. But before that, Luo Ying informed Lin Fei that this technique belonged to the Misty House village, and they were very dangerous. As they flew near Lin Fei, he noticed that these spiritual blades were suitable for high-level fighters. But people like them couldn't even wield them properly. The 3 daggers coiled as if they were fire. There was a tremendous amount of power embedded in them. They embedded themselves into the ground, not far from Lin Fei's feet. And then each made the same finger movement. So it was as if they had joined the daggers, and now they could wield them. They immediately rose up from the ground and flew into Lin Fei's face. But Lin Fei not only repelled them, he also added his power to those daggers, and now he could control all the trema. All the guards were frightened and puzzled as to how he had done it, for now their own daggers were rushing at them. Only Taming had a hunch that it might be his innate ability. But their battle was interrupted by some female voice with the words, "I'm friends here," and all three daggers slammed into the pillar. 10 minutes earlier, Yun Hong had come to her to ask about the guys. She was taking a bath at the time, and he told the story that the kid lit 35 lanterns at once. The girl was surprised, because an ordinary person couldn't do that. So she asked Yun Hun for more details, but Yun Hong said that he didn't know anything. But he only found out the surname of the man, Lin. The girl thought it was a family, but after thinking for a long time, she couldn't think of any family with the surname Lin. After hearing such stories from Yun Hun, she wanted to arrange a personal visit to this kid. So when Lin Fei saw her, he was a little dumbfounded. After all, this was the third Miss Yun San, the owner of the Misty House. Yun San, when she saw the guy, she was dumbfounded too. After all, she immediately remembered the Heaven and Earth Club where they met, and she also thought it was a homeless man, as he was very cheaply and poorly dressed for her taste. The guards immediately asked if she knew him, to which she replied, "I meted this man at the Chu family house." The guards all kneeled down at once, and Tamin began to apologize for wanting to maim him. Yun San was very angry with him, and that if it wasn't for Ling Gongzi's mercy, he would be dead by now with his cronies. So she sent to receive a pokerani, namely 50 blows, to thus apologize to Mr. Lin. Ming really didn't want to get punched, and started to make excuses and explain the situation to her, that he was just scared of the strange fight he had seen for the first time while living there, and vowed not to touch Lin Fei again from now on. Yun San was asked in a stern voice if he had forgotten the rules of the Misty House. He answered the question positively, and Yun San warned him that if he forgot the rules again, he would receive 50 lashes as punishment and sent them away out of sight. Yun Hong tensed up a bit. After all, he has a lot of professionalism that he has at such a young age, and to fire him, it would be very foolish. Yun San suggested to the esteemed Mr. Lin to accept an invitation to the Tianji Pavilion as an apology to prepare for tomorrow's auction. Lin Fei had no idea what was going on in this Tianji Pavilion, but Luo Ying was excited because this pavilion was the most highly qualified place to treat the 4 most famous families. For now, the Chu family has not arrived, and so, the first of the 4 pavilions of Tianji is free. Also, Yun Hong allowed his friend to stay there as well. Lin Fei pondered over her proposal, and Luo Ying encouraged him to stay in this pavilion, because it was then fashionable to get a lot of privileges in the Misty House. Therefore, there was simply no reason to refuse the invitation. Luo Ying's words convinced him. He thanked Miss Yun San and accepted the invitations. When everyone fell asleep, Lin Fei decided to take a walk outside, and also to find out the purpose of the interruption in Luo Ying's Misty House, for he knows and saw that he really has a problem. So he decided to go after him to find some paperwork or leads, or better yet, see what he would do. As he was running, Yun Hong came around the corner. She asked where he was going in the middle of the night. The first thing that came into his head was to say that he was just walking around. She approached him and put her hand on his shoulder, while she asked him to let her accompany him, to avoid having a bad time. Lin Fei realized what she was getting at, and thought that she was flirting with him in this way. Therefore, he tried to politely refuse. Yun Hong saw that he blushed and apologized, because she didn't mean it, although in her mind she wanted to seduce him, because she really liked him. But she realized that it was too early, because he was a little shy of her, and also she really had something to do with him, and asked to move to the room to talk. They began to talk about business, specifically regarding the order of the main 4 families in Jiai Bay and the 3 main groups of the Yun family. In this way, they talked for almost the entire night. On the second day, Yun Hong decided to show him the auction, where for Mr. Lin, it was all inappropriate and strange. When they arrived in the auction room, there were already bids of over 1 million simmering. Only the Lin family raised the bid from 1 million to 3 million. The important people there started to get indignant about who else had dared to outbid the Yun family. One of the men replied, "I think it was a young man named Ling Fei." Then Mr. Lin raised the bet again by another 100,000. Everyone was a little nervous, because Mr. Lin had raised the bet again, so he was openly competing with the Yun family. and everyone immediately wondered who the bold Mr. Lin was. At this time, Lin Fei and Yun Hui were sitting on the balcony with their bodyguards and watched the auction from on high. And across from their balcony sat Yun Tingxia, the second son of the Yun family, the older brother of Yun Fei-san, and gave him the punishment of finding out everything he could about Lin Fei. And when his manager found and told the information, namely that this person had lit 35 lanterns and gained special access to the pavilion, with each passing minute, Lin Fei became more and more interested in him. The manager also took out his special invitation to the Mist House. When Yun Tingxia saw his special invitation, he realized that he was very important to the Mist House, since it provided the best conditions for him. Next, his subject asked if he would place any more bets, to which Yun Tingxia declined for today. After, it was announced to everyone that the Yun family had withdrawn from the auction, Yun Tingxia surrendered. Everyone began to think even more about this stranger who was able to force the Yun family out of the auction. 3,100,000 on the third attempt went to Lin Fei. Everyone began to congratulate on obtaining the reishi blood. The bidding officially closed, and the guests were invited to go to the celebration hall for dinner. When Lin Fei and Yun Hong were walking alone in the hallway, he turned to her and thanked her for obtaining reishi's blood. He also asked her for a loan, since he doesn't have that much money right now. Yun Hong stood in a stupor and didn't know what to answer him. She said it was a gift and to just forget about the situation. But Lin Fei didn't want it that way, and he took it all to heart and promised that his debt would be repaid. Yun Hong smiled and put her hand on his shoulder, and then suggested that we go out for dinner since it was already night, and she would really like to eat with him. Lin Fei of course agreed, because he had a debt to repay. He also wanted to go to the attic to make sure of something. So he asked Yun Hong to pass through to the celebration hall first, and he had some business to attend to. Ta agreed to go first and to wait there for Mr. Lin. Also, Lin Fei not only wanted to see the attic, but he also wanted to take a break from her because she was really boring him. So he went to the attic. Like the previous attic structure, it is a matrix. But who the hell made it here? This was the question that tormented Lin Fei. As he got closer, he smelled an energy that could resonate with him. He was glad that he had actually gotten a good deal. Next, he sat down and began to meditate again. Closing his eyes and in deep thoughtfulness, calmly contemplating God, gritting his teeth, taking hold of Kunlun with both hands. This dual-powered method of development that will help him rise to the 7th level to reach the boundaries of the spiritual realm. But it turns out, going up to level 7 requires loosening the Emperor's shackles to get the ability upgrade. He said, "Combination of yin and yang, heaven and earth, open my eyes." Thus he activated the celestial eye. Through it he could see traces of energy usage, allowing him to track the caster. These tracks lead to his friend Luo Ying. He wanted to rob and take the sacred relics because everyone was at a feast dinner, so they had weak defenses. Lin Fei greeted him, and when he heard the voice, he was surprised why Mr. Lin didn't go to the feast. Lin Fei was a bit pissed off and right, and he really didn't just want to enter the Misty House. Luo Ying asked him to calm down, otherwise he wouldn't guarantee his safety. He also pulled out the knife behind his back. Lin Fei laughed as he spoke of safety. Luo Ying was trying to intimidate him, not to start an unnecessary battle. He was trying to hurt him and make him look weak. He also said that the 35 lanterns were just an accident. Lin Fei stood still, not reacting to his words, only started warming up because he realized that the battle could not be avoided. He only said in a very rough and grayish voice, "I'll show you my strength." Luo Ying was scared beyond belief after hearing his words. After all, he had seen him in battle before. Lin Fei was behind his back in a split second. He threw his knife away and hit him in the stomach, which sent him flying. Taking him by the neck, he said, "You're so low for me!" And he threw it again. Then he caught up and again took him by the neck and pressed him against a tree. He immediately apologized for calling him weak. Afterward, he let him go on the condition that he tell him his purpose. Li. He explained to him that he just wanted to fart everything that belonged to him. He was supposed to become the young master of the Luo family, but he was framed in the end. He left his home as an outsider, so he wants to borrow the power of Rad Miao to return to the Luo family. After listening to his story, Lin Fei wanted to help him and told him to follow him to Miss San. But Luo Ying stopped him. Lin Fei didn't like it, but he asked him to listen. If he let him go, he would be willing to take away the bloodstone intended for the Miao people. It really interested him because he knows that it is the greatest treasure for training. Many people are ready to tear it off with their hands. In fact, it is a unique stone, contains a large amount of energy. It is used as a tempering vessel of magic. So he made a deal with him. He must stay with him at all times until they discovered the Bloodstone. In order to release him, he needs to defeat the Miaojiang family, and they both went out for a celebratory dinner. When they were about to approach the feast, then Lin Fei heard in the crowd some couple of kids were discussing about their boss, who would be furious since they couldn't get Reishi's blood this time. To Lin Fei, it was a very familiar voice, but who exactly he remembered, so he decided to see exactly who was saying it. When he saw it, he was very shocked. There was Mu Qingqing, who was talking to her ally about cooperating with the Yun Shi group, and that this guy who was talking to Mu Qingqing was very afraid to tell the boss about the failure. She took pity on him and said that she would bear all the responsibility herself. And after that, they went somewhere else. Turns out there's quite a lot he doesn't know about his wife. At this time, there were two boys practicing in the forest. One of them was holding an orb that sensed Luo Ying's energy. And at that moment, the energy disappeared, which meant he survived and went somewhere. The second one spilled out and hit the tree with one blow, causing it to shatter into two pieces. Afterward, he vowed to kill Luo Ying no matter what it took. Lin Fei and Luo Ying had yet to guess their existence, that they were threatened. At that time, they were already sitting in the central hall of the feast. Across from him sat the businessman Yun Tingxia, who was shocked, for he had only now learned that Mr. Lin, who had taken Reishi's blood, turned out to be Lin Fei. He was also furious since before he had sent the Black Dragon Church to destroy him. Yun-san stood up with a glass of wine and made a toast. She also thanked that everyone was able to come to the Misty House auction, so she raised her glass and thanked once again. Yun Tingxiang also stood up, prostrated himself, and asked Mr. Lin to make a toast. All the people sitting around him supported his proposal. Lin Fei, on the other hand, loudly announced to everyone that he was refusing. Everyone was shocked and puzzled as to how he dared to refuse Master Yun's offer. He Yao, Yun Yangshu's bodyguard, didn't like his words and threatened to kill him for disrespecting him. He only laughed at his threats, which made him even more furious. So he decided not to waste even his energy, but to kill him more proudly. In a split second, I was in front of his face. But before he could even touch him, Lin Fei waved the hand in which he had concentrated his power in front of him, causing him to simply fly away. He took a chopstick, quickly walked over to him and started pressing the chopstick into his neck. At the same time, he asked in a rude and serious voice, "Your owner said nothing, so why are you, dog, spreading your hands?" Yun Tingxia was surprised by the strength of this kid, because even his professional bodyguard flew off in a couple of seconds. Yun-san, on the other hand, was glad that she had made the right choice. Yun Tingxia thought, since he was so strong, why not entice him to join him? So he stood up from the table and praised him for such speed and strength, and said that if one had such skills and joined the Yun family faction, one could achieve a lot. Without letting Lin Fei reply, Yun Xian jumped into this conversation and calmed him down a bit, saying that Mr. Lin was a distinguished visitor to her house, so she was sincerely sorry and asked him to forget about it. He politely asked his little sister not to interfere in the conversation, and again praised young Master Lin's skills. He also gave him time to think and promised to meet again, and left with his bodyguards out of the feast, smiling evasively at that, for he knew he still had plenty of time to play with him. At this time, Yun-san realized that second brother would not just let Lin Fei in since he had known him for a long time. So she ran away from him, thus trying not to jeopardize him either, and wanted him out of here as soon as possible. Lin Fei didn't understand why she ran away, only slightly guessed. And so he ran after her, while explaining to Luo Ying to leave to him if he didn't return. When he caught up with her and asked her what was wrong, she pointed out that he had hurt her older brother, and from now on, he should be more careful. Lin Fei didn't care about that at all, and he had never been afraid of something like that. But once again, she repeated that he had offended her brother, and now it was not only his brother who was to be feared. She mentioned a character like He Lun Jiao, popularly known as the Black Dragon. It was a secret underground organization which repeatedly took in the murders of mentor cultivators. Therefore, it's an extremely dangerous organization. Besides, her second brother and the master of the Black Dragon and Tang Tang are quite close. Therefore, she reiterated that he should be careful, especially cautious of a man who has scars on his face, one on his forehead and one on his nose, and advised that if he met him, he should just run as far away as possible and not stop. Lin Fei immediately realized that it was about his secret assassin man. He grabbed her by the shoulders and asked in a loud and nervous voice what the man's name was. She replied that his name was Lao Pan. If this Lao Pan was indeed the one who killed him in his back then he would be able to take revenge on him and absorb his chi. After a few seconds, Yun-sun got a little embarrassed and asked him to let go, as it was painful. Although it felt good at the same time. He was very excited about this situation, and also radium that he was starting to make progress towards his goal. Yun-sun thought that this way he was flirting with her and loving her, but when she started to get to him, he realized what she was doing and told her that he was already married. She got a little upset, of course. Lin Fei remembered about the agreement with Luo Ying and the stone, so he told Mrs. Yun-sun that evening someone was going to come to steal the treasure of Yunwu Mountain Villa, and also clarified that the thieves wanted to steal Miao Xinjiang's relics. Mrs. Yun-sun was very angry after saying that. Then he wondered how he could know all this. Lin Fei saw from her face that she wanted to ask how he knew everything, and if he was a traitor. So he told her that before going to the feast, he noticed something abnormal and heard, so he went there and already wanted to attack, but the one managed to escape. She wondered what he looked like. Lin Fei, on the fly, came up with the trivial excuse that there was a mask on his face and he couldn't see that face. She suspected him even more of complicity or deception, so she asked him to help her catch the thief. To her surprise, he agreed without hesitation. She thanked him for his help, but he said it wasn't worth it, for she had done many times more for him. When night came, everyone took up their positions near the treasury. Lin Fei and Luo Ying were together, and the latter was always worried and afraid of them. Lin Fei reassured him because they would not be able to touch them. He thanked the man for reassuring him, but Lin Fei reminded him that if he didn't get the blood jade, he wouldn't be able to leave without serious consequences. After a few minutes, they saw some two kids walking towards the treasure room. Those two were just discussing the plan and didn't understand why they were able to sneak into this Yunwu Mountain Villa so easily. Walking a little farther, from behind a hump, they saw a very, very unpleasant sight, from which they were utterly stupefied. Yun-san met them there, as well as a bunch of people standing behind her. They began to be attacked and fed on and twisted, but one of those dudes gathered his strength in his fist and ran towards Yun-san. He wanted to kill her, because then everyone else would be quiet. Lin Fei saw a dude running at third sister Yun who wanted to kill her, so he stood in front of her, thus covering her. After a split second, they punched each other right in the fist. This created a large wind, which raised the saw around them a bit. Next, they jumped away from each other at a distance. The man warned that he was at the peak stage of level 6, and that he didn't even have a chance of defeating him. Lin Fei laughed at him again, for once again he was being threatened, and not given a chance to defeat his opponents. He was furious, so the kid quickly gathered his strength in his fist and rushed towards Lin Fei to attack him. The kid was sure he'd already won. After all, he hadn't even moved, and now it was too late to avoid the blow. In doing so, he used the technique of poisoned palm. In response, he used the Heavenly Thunder Palm technique. With all their strength in their fists, they struck again. Again, a wind was created from such a force of impact, and also it became light as if it were daylight. It wasn't until a few seconds later, when the dust had more or less settled, that they saw Lin Fei standing as he was, and that kid flew away. Luo Ying stood in the far away, saw him actually fly up to the sky, and didn't understand how this was possible. That one hit the ground really hard. His brother came running up to him right away, to bring him to his senses. That kid was a little bloodied, but he was almost powerless. He was also surprised that Lin Fei was at the innate realm level. Indeed, Lin Fei had a very strong chi that he cannot defeat, so they decided to retreat, for they had no strength at all to fight. His brother took 2 smoke bombs out of his pocket and threw them near him, and in that time, they got as far away as they could. Lin Fei didn't foresee this scenario, so he ran into that smoke to look for them. It was empty, so he promised Ms. Yun to catch them, and also not to worry about all of this. In response, she only said to be cautious and wished me luck. At this time, the 2 thieves were already in a field. The one who had fought against Lin Fei had already more or less regained his strength, but he continued to walk on and fought against his brother, as he had a small injury on his leg. And in a moment, they heard a rustling behind them in the grass. Lin Fei jumped out from there with the words, "You cannot escape!" Those from the desperate situation fell on their knees and began to ask forgiveness for everyone. They also promised to pay very well if he would let them go. He looked at them and maybe let them go, but he had already promised Ms. Yun to catch them and hand them over personally. Just as he started to approach them, from the leaves of a tree, someone threw a dagger right at him. Lin Fei of course reacted and didn't let himself get hit, and then a man in all black and even wearing a mask popped out. Lin Fei immediately activated his strength and the fight began. Their palms met, and this blow was similar to the last two, but now neither of them flew off. So they had about the same strength. Looking into each other's eyes, both were afraid to fight, since both were very strong. So the dude in black jumped away from him and instructed him to stay out of it again, or he'd kill him. And then he took out the smoke bombs, threw them underneath him, and they disappeared. Lin Fei ducked behind them, but it was already empty. He was about to chase after them, but he heard an explosion and saw smoke coming from the side of the pavilion. And then he remembered that Luo Yin was still there, and it must be him. So he rushed over there. At this time, Yunsun was just reporting to her about what had happened. Namely, someone had blown up the gate, and they had already sent someone to assess the situation. She hesitated for a moment, and then she saw Lin Fei. Yun immediately ran to him to ask him how he was feeling and what was wrong with him. He said he almost caught him out. But suddenly a masked man took from, and when he wanted to chase him, there was a powerful explosion. But she didn't care about the thieves. The most important thing to her was that Mr. Lin wasn't hurt. At this time, another servant came in and told what had happened on the actual. The gate of Yunwu Mountain Villa had indeed been partially damaged, and there were no casualties. Except that after a thorough investigation, they discovered that a few pieces of blue jade in the tracery were missing. Yunsan was surprised. After all, why did they need blood jade specifically? Lin Fei, on the other hand, realized that the blood jade was exactly what Luo Ying had promised. He also wondered if the latter could easily run away from him. Therefore, he activated the heavenly eyes, and he had indeed found a trace of Luo Ying's energy. Lin Fei said as he went to take a look at the surroundings. Yunsan didn't guess anything, and only wished to be careful. His subject offered to follow him, but she stopped him and told him he wasn't involved, because she believes in him. At this time, Lin Fei was following Luo Ying's footsteps, and they led him to a large tree. When the latter saw Lin Fei, he was overjoyed. After all, he believed he had made the right choice. Lin Fei said stop talking, and asked what his purpose was. That one started to miss the point and apologize right away, and Lin Fei realized what he wanted to say, namely that he had blown up the gate of Yunwu Mountain Villa. He also asked why he had done so. Luo Ying explained that he couldn't give him the blood jade, and the only way was to steal it. Besides, the treasure pavilion of Yunwu Mountain Villa was strictly protected, and he could only think of and use this method to attract their attention. Although he wasn't too strong while everyone was busy, he was able to enter the treasure pavilion and take it away. Then he pulled out of his pocket 4 small pebbles. That was the blood jade. After looking at them, Lin Fei refused to take them. Luo Ying shouted heavily in misunderstanding, "Why?" Lin Fei replied simply that he didn't like stolen goods. After saying those words, Luo Ying clenched his fist and called himself a trash who couldn't fulfill that promise. He started asking me to trust him, and if he still wanted to help him return to his family, he would be sure to provide unlimited resources. Lin Fei laughed a little at his persistence, and asked why he had come to ask specifically for him, and why on earth he should help at all. But it was simple. To Luo Ying, Lin Fei was the strongest and most promising person he had ever met, and he had not seen such an impenetrable person. And if he brother Lin would still help him, then when he became the young master of the Luo family, O would be willing to provide all the resources of the Luo family, and always follow him wherever he went. Lin Fei was interested in this, so he looked into his eyes, and pulled his hand in his direction. They shook hands. Thus, from that day onwards, he was to follow Lin Fei. And to keep the man from betraying him, he reminded him that if the man betrayed him, he would just take his life. He swore he wouldn't do such a thing, of course, but he was somehow sad. Lin Fei asked what the matter was, and Luo Ying recalled that now Miao Xinjiang considered him a sworn enemy, and now he was very afraid. And that was really the problem. But Lin Fei promised him that he wouldn't let him harm him, and to that end, he asked him to tell everything he could about them. But looking at his watch, it was too late, and he instructed him to find a place where Luo Ying could hide tonight, and he scheduled a meeting with him tomorrow at Wanshan Cafe. He also reminded him to return the blood jade. And after that, they parted ways. At this time in the Zhuangju Pavilion, Yunsan was chatting with Uncle Hong, specifically asking where all the guards were when the blood jade was stolen. Uncle Hong said he takes full responsibility for the case and insisted on checking Mr. Lin's background. She swept her hand across the throne, and in an angry voice explained to him again that she trusted him, and she was sure he wasn't involved. Uncle Hong immediately bent down and apologized. At this moment, Lin Fei walked into the pavilion just then. Yunsan, hoping that he had found at least one clue, immediately asked what his situation was. But he only apologized because he found no useful evidence. She wasn't too upset by this information. In response, Lin Fei notified Yun-san that he had been delayed here, and he should be on his way. Yun-san was even happy for him. After all, she understood that Mr. Lin was a family man, so she didn't want to take up any more of his time. She also asked Uncle Yun to bring the Holy Spirit blood and give it to Mr. Lin. This blood was packed in a beautiful box, and Uncle Yun handed it to Lin Fei with a big chet. In turn, he thanked for the blood and left. Yun-san wished him good luck and also wished him to be careful on the road. After all, she still remembered the threat from her older brother. At this time, the very 3 bandits who wanted to steal from the treasury were discussing Luo Ying, namely that he dared to betray them, and now they only wanted to kill him. But the man in black with the mask stopped those 2. After all, only he realized that that person, meaning Lin Fei, was very strong, and would also kill him at the first opportunity. The one didn't really understand his words. After all, if it wasn't for Lin Fei, they would have had everything go according to plan and stole what they wanted. But still, he wanted to send someone to find out everything about him. Otherwise, his existence would be for their big problem. At this time, there was a meeting in the Mu family's villa. Mu Guli, the head of the family, and also Mu Qingcheng's father, had organized this meeting to discuss one very important thing, namely, the Holy Spirit blood that was auctioned off by Jiangju Pavilion. And since, for this task was in charge of his daughter, of course he asked her for the result. Mu Qingcheng, in a quiet and sad voice, uttered, "Father, I got nothing." Further, she explained that the second master of the Yun family was also involved, but even he was unable to acquire. In the end, the blood fell into the hands of a family with the surname Lin. That made the father very angry. He began to think back to the family with that last name, but nothing even came close. Mu Feng, Mu Guochang's son, and also Mu Guli's younger brother, began to harp on her that she had made it all up and was lying so that her father wouldn't be so angry with her. Mu Qingcheng heard his words and shouted to the entire hall, "I'm not lying!" Mu Feng started to continue to pinch her and hurt her relationship with Lin Fei. Namely, that her business ability had deteriorated after marrying a real loser. And if he had known that Tia would fail, he would have done everything himself. Mu Qingcheng immediately gagged him. She instructed him not to talk about Lin Fei like that. In their conversation, Mu Guli's father joined in, while loudly slapping his hand on the table. He also reminded her that if she did not return the blood of the Holy Luce, she would voluntarily divorce him. Mu Feng was happy to hear such a thing, but Mu Qingcheng asked to believe in her one last time. Mu Guli, gritting his teeth, allowed her not to divorce him if she brought the blood of the Holy Spirit. After all, he was tired of seeing this trash, and didn't understand what she even saw in him. After saying that, everyone heard the door creak open. Lin Fei himself entered the hall with the box that Yun-san had given him. When he entered, Mu Guli and Mu Qingcheng were shocked, for no one expected to see him here. Mu Feng wasn't very happy about this meeting either, for he didn't want to see this loser. Mu Qingcheng started yelling at Mu Feng again because of Lin Fei's ridicule. He looked him menacingly in the eye and told him to get out of here immediately. To which Lin Fei asked, "What happens if he says no?" Mu Guli began to tell him the rules of the Mu family, that if one does not belong to the family, he must leave home. Mu Qingcheng didn't listen to him any further, because she knew what he was leading up to and what he wanted to do. So she stood in front of the main character and covered him up. She also explained that Lin Fei was now officially her husband, and he was also a member of the Mu family. Mu Feng also reminded her that if she went against the rules of the head of the family, it would be considered treason. Mu Guli broke into the conversation, and again reminded her of the agreement they had made, namely that if she did not receive the blood of the saints, they would divorce. He threatened that if they couldn't do it themselves, he would. Only now did Lin Fei realize that her wife had gone to Yunwu Villa because of him. All she did was to save their relationship. So, after putting everything together in his head, he asked Mu Guli what would happen if he could get her. He thought for a moment and gave him an answer. He would no longer interfere with them or try to breed them. But since there was no blood, she must do his will, namely that they should part. Lin Fei put the box on the table and told him that he had gotten it. When he opened that box, everyone saw the blood of the Holy Spirit, and absolutely everyone in the room was shocked. Mu Feng didn't correct himself for getting her too easily. So he got up from the table and reminded everyone that the winner of this auction was not him. And it all looked very much like a fake, and I didn't believe a word he said. Lin Fei smiled caustically and asked if he really wanted to bet that it wasn't fake. Mu Feng didn't understand what the other person was getting at. He explained to him that he wanted to argue with him despite being a big secret of the Mu family. This really pissed him off, so he activated the power on his fist and ran towards him to kill him. He stood in front of Mu Qingcheng, thus covering her without even activating his strength. Lin Fei managed to grab his fist with his palm. He also said he was too weak to compete with him. The one stood aghast and frightened, for he did not understand how he had done it. Then Lin Fei started to clench his fist, thus wanting to show how weak he was compared to him. Mu Feng started screaming in pain, and then, with great speed, he threw it far away. Mu Fei managed to be caught by the other family members, but he was still not bewildered and also exhausted. Muguli immediately walked over to him and stopped him. Looking at his eye, he couldn't believe that he had become a cultivator. Mu Fei began to break free from the hands of his colleagues, and also shouted that according to the information he had received, it was not Mu Qingcheng who had received the Holy Spirit blood, and it must be fake, while guaranteeing it with the name of his employer. And in his eyes, he could see a lust for revenge and anger. He had long controlled his every move, and this time, he was sure that this time, he would definitely be excluded from the candidates for the landlord position. Muguli calmed him down, but he could see that he was controlled by his thirst for revenge. So before accusing him, he asked Song Lao Mu, who was the first-class appraiser in their family, to see if it was genuine. It only took him a couple seconds, and he easily determined that it was indeed authentic. Everyone was shocked and in a stupor. Only Mu Qingcheng alone was happy for her husband, for he had saved the marriage. Mu Feng was the most shocked of all, for his information had failed him, and turned out to be untrustworthy. Lin Fei only laughed at him. He also congratulated him because he was lucky that they had not made a dispute with each other. Mu Feng, realizing that the situation wasn't on his side, started using the family's rules, and instructed him to get the hell out of other people's territory. Lin Fei wanted to already go over to him and deal with him, but Mu Qingcheng grabbed his hand and told him to forget about it. So he looked at him and said he was free this time, for since his wife had forgiven him, he saw no need for it. He only vowed to avenge him for such humiliation. Father approached Mu Qingcheng and apologized for doubting her and praised her for her good robot. But she said that a greater percentage of the credit went to Lin Fei, so he turned around to him and praised him too. And since he had helped the Mu family so much, he invited him to stay for dinner. Lin Fei agreed and thanked, but after looking into each other's eyes, they realized that they still disliked each other. At this time, Mu Feng was outside with his bodyguard and was waiting to meet his informant. The one immediately began to rant at him, saying that the information was not accurate, and Mu Qingcheng appeared to have the blood of a holy spirit. Lin Quen, the teacher of the elite black dragons as well as his informant. He explained that the information he provided was accurate, and the fact that she had the blood of the Saint Luce was not his concern. After that, Mu Fei started yelling at him. After all, he had paid him $200,000, and the result was 0. The one just looked him in the eye. Yi Mu Feng immediately shut up, and sweat broke out from his forehead. His bodyguard, seeing what threatened his boss, stood in front of him, covering him with himself. Ling Quen asked him if he really wanted to go against the Black Dragon. Mu Feng pushed his guard back, kneeling down. All he asked for was help to kill one man. Lin Quen immediately started with the price, because for nothing, he didn't even want to take on a robot. He offered him $500,000. Lin Quen wanted to first look at the face of the person he needed to kill before making a decision. After looking at the picture, the man agreed, and then he turned silently and walked away. The personal guard, nicknamed Black Bear, asked Mu Feng if this strange kid could be trusted. Mu Feng explained to him, since he trusted Black Bear the most, that the blood of the Holy Spirit was in Mu Jingcheng's hands, and he would make every effort to make her trust in Mu Guli disappear. After all, the position of the head of the Mu family should be his. And that creep Lin Fei, he'll make him die in agony. At this time, in the Black Dragon's training hall, Yunting Xian was proving to Pan, Lin Fei's assassin with the scarred face, that not only was Lin Fei not dead, but he had also become incredibly strong. Pan was interested when he said that he had become incredibly strong. Yunting Xian also asked if their cooperation was still valid after such information. Pan of course replied that since he was able to kill him once, he would be able to kill him again. So their cooperation is still valid. At this moment, Lin Quan walked into the Black Dragon's training room with news of his $500,000 order. He handed Lin Fei's photo to Peng, who was surprised at the coincidence. If he said that he had become many times stronger, it was better to let Lin Quan find out. So he sent him on a reconnaissance, and afterward he ordered him to report to him all that would become known. Also, Pan wondered how many more lives he had left. At this time, Lin Fei, as well as Mu Qingcheng, were already at home, and she still couldn't believe that it was really the blood of a holy spirit. She also didn't understand why the one didn't say that the person with the surname Lin at the auction was him. but he only looked so stupid on the surface. Lin Fei realized that if the Mu family directly obtained the Holy Spirit blood, it would cause a fuss, and he didn't want to cause trouble for him. But from this information that Lin Fei said, Mu Qingcheng didn't understand where he got the money from for such an expensive item. Lin Fei didn't want to tell her about his adventures so that she wouldn't get worried or jealous. Therefore, he asked her not to worry about it. In a moment, he heard a strange aura and immediately stood in front of Mu Qingcheng to protect her. Nothing was happening, so Lin Fei told him to get out. A silhouette began to appear from the dark corridor, and the one said that he had to try his best to find Lin Fei. Mu Qingcheng immediately started yelling who he even was, and how dare he enter this house. It was Lin Quan who was supposed to scout this place, but he decided to be more aggressive and radical. He was also surprised that the Mu family was here, and immediately complimented her, for she was very beautiful. She started yelling and trying to hit him, but Lin Fei stopped her and asked her to go upstairs and leave all this worrying to him. She only wished him luck and went to the top, for she believed in him and his strength. Lin Fei leisurely took out a cigarette and a lighter and lit a cigarette. While doing so, he said to Lin Quan, "You're not worthy to take my life." Ling Quan was only angered by this, and he wanted to kill him even more, so he ran with all speed at him. And he also activated the Black Dragon Claw, and a paw-like power with claws accumulated on his hand. He took his time finishing the cigarette and threw it away, because now he had better skills than the others. In a split second, he quickly jumped toward him, at lightning speed. Deftly and carefully, he managed to hit with great force and speed, right in his face. Lin Quan couldn't realize what had happened and flew in the opposite direction from Lin Fei with great speed. Next, Lin Fei quickly ran towards him and grabbed his leg, then drove him into the ground with great force. Lin Quan was completely exhausted and redundant, as well as at a loss as to what had just happened to him. Lin Fei thought that it wasn't enough, so he took his hand and broke it. The one immediately started screaming from such terrible pain, after Lin Fei started to twist her, thus hurting her. And Lin Quan started to beg for mercy, and also mentioned about the Black Dragon. When Lin Fei heard about these Black Dragons, he was very curious. After all, he knew that Lao Pan was the master of the Black Dragons, and he could use him to find clues. So he let go of his hand, and ordered him to run away out of his sight, and gave him 5 seconds, or he would kill him. Ling Quan didn't believe at first that he wanted to let him go. Lin Fei started counting down, and he immediately ran away from the house. This was Lin Fei Yu's brilliantly simple plan. After all, he couldn't just let him go and thus lose such an opportunity. So lighting a cigarette and waiting a little while, he fell on his tail. After a while, Ling Quan walked into some strange abandoned cave. To Lin Fei, this was some strange place, but still, he had no choice. Lin Quan walked into the conference room, all exhausted and with a broken arm. He immediately started looking for Pan. Wang Long stood up from the table. He was an A-class Black Dragon and also trains elite members, and asked what happened to him, for he knew that he was a very good fighter, which meant it was a very strong opponent. The one said it was not important and asked him to bring Pan there quickly. But that was not possible, for Pan went to the head teacher, saying that he had urgent business to attend to. Ling Quan immediately started to get angry, but their conversations were interrupted by Lin Fei entering this hall. Everyone was puzzled as to how an ordinary kid had gotten here, and only Ling Quan was very much startled to see him again. His accomplice saw the fear on his face and asked him if he knew who this guy was. Ling Quan told the story that it was the guy who beat him and broke his arm. After thinking for a while, he calmed down, because now that there were many of them and he was alone, he was dead. Lin Fei heard what they said, laughed, and called them lowlifes. After all, he knew that even they wouldn't be a problem for him. Wang Long didn't like the way he was talking to them, or how he dared to come here at all, so he took out his katana and challenged him to a fight. Ling Quan saw him challenge him to a fight, and immediately began to discourage him from fighting so easily without thinking, because only Ling Quan knew what a clever strategist he was, and a very strong guy. Lin Fei only laughed at him again, and explained that he was at the peak of the 6th level of Xuanjing. Daring to attack him was the dumbest idea ever. They were tired of chatting, and Wang Long jumped at him with his katana while activating the Rasengan technique. Lin Fei ducked at him as well, and used the Imperial Gasification Sword technique, and his arm began to coil with lightning. And when they collided with each other in the sky, and sparks appeared, for they repelled each other's attack. When Wang Long landed on the ground, his katana shattered into pieces from Lin Fei's strike. Lin Fei didn't want to just let him go, so as he was shocked by his katana, he quickly ran towards him, activating the sky-splitting technique. He passed his hand through his body, thus killing him. Everyone standing around was shocked. Ling Quan stood there unmoving, and in his eyes was only fear, which was getting bigger by the second. He couldn't believe that Wang Long had been defeated after all. He had to be stronger than Wang Long to just kill him like this. Lin Fei didn't want to stop, so he calmly said, "You're next." And all the Black Dragon members who were present there began to abruptly flee as soon as possible from there. After hours of carnage, there was blood everywhere. There were too many of them and he had to sweat. Only Lin Quan remained there, and it was useless for Lin Fei to keep him in that state, so he wanted to kill him. But the latter immediately started shouting for him to stop. Ling Can told him about the treasury, and that he was the one who had the key to it. This made Lin Fei very interested, as he hadn't thought about it, because he had gotten too carried away, and almost missed such a great opportunity to become richer and even stronger. So he made him take him there. After 5 minutes, they went down to somewhere in the basement. When they reached the treasure room door, Ling Quan said that the key was in the upper right corner, but the latter warned him that if he lied to him, his life would turn into a real nightmare. There really was a key, so he stuck the key in the door and opened it. There were tons of chests and cabinets stuffed with gold, diamonds, and diamonds. Lin Fei didn't expect the Black Dragons to have a treasury with such a mountain of valuable items. At this time, at the Black Dragon headquarters, Pan was lashing out. After all, it had been reported to him that someone had dared to raid their home. According to the information reported to him, all the participants were killed at one point, and a large amount of treasure was stolen. That pissed him off even more, and he was ready to tear the bastard right there. So he instructed to prepare the vehicles to return to the main hall to meet the leader and discuss it all. At this time, Lin Fei was already meditating on his bed. After all, in the Black Dragon treasury, there are many good things, but only half of them were used to raise the 8th innate level. At the 8th level, he became better at controlling true form Qi and learned the skill of perfect enhancement. And as of now, this is the best level increase for him. While he was meditating, someone started banging on the door and breaking in. When he opened the door, Mu Qingcheng was there. After he came back, he asked her not to touch him, and now she was even more worried about him. Lin Fei, without going into details, calmed her down and told her not to worry. After all, everything was fine. The next day, he met Luo Ying at a cafe. Luo Ying called him over to tell him about Miao Xinjiang's plan. They each took a drink and sat down at the table. Luo Ying explained that there was a man called Poison Master. Recently, his leader had almost improved his level, but he needed the blood of a Saint Luz to finish. Therefore, he participated in the auction of Yunwu Mountain Villa. That was actually why he had contacted Lin Fei, and he asked him where he had put the blood of the Holy Spirit. Lin Fei immediately thought that he wanted to steal this blood from him, but Luo Ying started to stop him and justified that he didn't mean that. Besides the Miao heritage, they definitely want to steal the blood of the Holy Spirits as soon as possible, Lin Fei reassured him, saying that the Mu family had this item now, and getting it would not be easy. Lin Fei then asked Luo Ying what he needed to do to become his family's successor. It turned out that in a month there would be a battle, where if he could win, he would win over the old woman and become the family's sole successor. Lin Fei thought for a while and realized that it really sounded easy. Therefore, he gave him a Tando Pan, and if this teacher poison gives him trouble, one should immediately pour his true energy into him. Lin Fei would sense this, and would immediately come to his aid as quickly as possible. Luo Ying immediately wondered where Lin Fei's brother got such cool stuff from. He said that last night, he went to the Black Dragon headquarters and got a lot of valuable things, and was lucky enough to find this item. He was in a stupor when he heard about the Black Dragons. After talking, the two of them separated, since Lin Fei still had to pick up his wife after work. In this at the Yadov Academy headquarters, there was a woman sitting on a throne with a bunch of subjects across from her. It was Shang Guanyun, the head of the Poison Academy, and she was very angry at her subjects, because they hadn't gotten her the Miaojiang holy relic, or the blood of the Saint Luce, and she didn't know what to do with them. In front of her throne, kneeling in front of her were two subordinates. Li Da, an elite member of the second hall of the Poison Academy, and Li Xiaoxiao, an elite member of the second hall of the Poison Academy, as well as Li Du's younger brother. They both made excuses that it was an accident, and they would definitely take them back no matter what it cost them. Shang Guanyun was interested in the words about the accident and asked them to tell what happened there. Lida said that somehow the information they had was false. The master in Yunwu Mountain Villa had defeated him with just one move, and if it hadn't been for Zhang Lao who had taken action, neither he nor his brother Li Xiaoxiao would have been able to return alive. His brother only confirmed his words. Shang Ganyun had indeed heard that Yunwu Mountain Villa had been badly damaged. Therefore, she asked old Jian to check if what they said was true. Zhang Lao was an elder, and he indeed confirmed their words. And he also added that there was an explosion on Yunwu Mountain that day, which helped prevent the pursuit. And if it wasn't for the explosion, they wouldn't have been able to escape. This story interested her greatly, and she also asked the elder what was the gender of this man who had managed to defeat her subordinates. He replied that it was a man, meaning Lin Fei. When Shang Guanyun heard that it was a man, it made her more and more interested. Therefore, raising a little, she instructed Li Dai and Li Xiaoxiao to find out all the information about this guy within 3 days, and immediately for them to deliver this information to her personally. After that, they immediately ran after him, very fast. Li Xiaoxiao had questions about Lin Fei, for he had become too strong for both of them. Li Da told his mind to calm down, for he had a plan. At this time, 2 people were talking in the Mu family's house. It was Guo Qiang and Mu Guoqiang, Wu Guli's younger brother, and also a member of the Mu family. Father heard that at yesterday's meeting, Mu Qingcheng had embarrassed him. Guo Qiang explained that it wasn't his concern, and he didn't expect Lin Fei to interfere with his plan. Mu Guoqiang was furious, for he didn't understand how this Lin Fei could even interfere with him. Guo Qiang revealed that Lin Fei didn't know what was going on. He also didn't expect that one to be very strong. But he also worried about it, and arranged for someone to take him out. His father only asked him to be careful and clean. He also reminded him that tomorrow was his grandmother's birthday, and if he wanted to take this opportunity, he should make her happy. Maybe he could even take the title of the head of the family in one fell swoop. At this time, Lin Fei unsuspectingly meditated in his room again. Letting the remaining half of the Black Dragon's treasures prevented him from breaking through again, but there was a slight improvement. After the mock-up, he got a text message on his phone. Luo Ying wrote to him, "Real information. Within a few days, the Poison Academy will send people after you. Be careful." This was a novelty for Lin Fei, because turning out Luo Ying's ability was not just stealing. He also thanked him and wrote that he would take care of it. The next day, Lin Fei and Mu Qingcheng went to Mu's house. And there were a lot of people there. It was Grandma's birthday after all. Lin Fei was very happy to see his wife in such a beautiful dress, and complimented her. But in response, she asked what his gift to her grandmother was, for he still hadn't told her. But Guo Qiang got into their conversation. Mu Qingcheng understands what he had to say, so without letting him say anything, she told him to get away from them, as it's her grandmother's birthday, and she doesn't want to fight with him, so she told him not to go too far. Guo Qiang was outraged and furious, since that day in the Mu family hall he had insulted him publicly, and now he was being told not to go too far. Realizing that he wouldn't let them go, Lin Fei approached him and said in a threatening voice, "You still need fingers, don't you?" Guo Qiang was frightened by his threats, and even crouched down a bit. Mu Qingcheng saw him start to pinch him, so she stopped him, and arranged with him to have no problem today. The one, of course, listened to her and patted her on the head. After a few minutes, some man in black kicked the door open with his foot. He was immediately followed by other black-clad people who were pressed against the wall. Then Pan entered with the words, "Black dragons are here. Today your family Mu will be destroyed." Lin Fei leisurely lit a cigarette and smiled, for he had fallen for his plan. All the people who were standing around stood in a stupor, and a little began to be afraid of the type. The head and also Mu Qingcheng's father, Mu Guli, approached him and began to calm him down, saying that today was his mother's birthday, and politely asked him not to make a mess here. Pan smiled and sarcastically apologized for inconveniencing the guests. He then quickly rushed towards him and wanted to punch him in the face, but Mu Guli blocked his punch with his hands at the last moment. But he also flew away from it in the opposite direction from him. He was caught by Su Lao, one of the Mu family's trusted men. He thanked him and said it was fine, although he realized that he was at the peak of level 6, and he was no match for him. So he started to apologize to him, although he didn't know how the Mu family had offended the Black Dragon Society. But he hoped that he would accept his apology. But even if he did get compensation for his entire family, he couldn't physically afford it. That one immediately thought it was all from the blood of the Holy Spirit. Mrs. C, the birthday girl, interjected into their conversation, saying that it was a sin to break into someone else's house. Earlier in her life, she had been fortunate enough to have the opportunity to interact with the teacher of the Black Dragons, and she hoped those showed a modicum of respect. Thoth laughed out loud when he heard about the drop of respect. He also told her that even she couldn't make up for his loss and get his reputation back. Grandma Sai, of course, asked who dared to offend the Black Dragons. Pan shouted menacingly, "Who? Ask Ling Fei, your daughter-in-law's husband," and pointed his finger at him. Mu Qingcheng was surprised at what she said. But Lin Fei said in his defense that it had been so long ago, and he was completely calm. Muguli was furious with his son-in-law. He didn't understand what the hell he had done to provoke the elders of the Black Dragon Society. But Lin Fei started to justify that he had done nothing wrong and it was just a small misunderstanding, and he didn't understand why everyone was so angry at him. Although in his head, he realized everything perfectly. Muguli started yelling even more and ordered him to apologize immediately. Pan clenched his fists and could barely contain the strength to hold back. He had told absolutely everyone who was there that the bastard had 70% of his subordinates dead, stolen all the treasure from the vault, and he let call it a misunderstanding. Grandma C was shocked, because if it was true that he had destroyed 70% of the Black Dragons, then his strength must have reached an innate level. So young and already a cultivator, maybe he could really help the Mu family grow. Pan didn't restrain himself, so activating the power on his fist, he would first kill Lin Fei and then the Mu family. He quickly ran towards him and jumped at him while activating the Dragon Palm technique. Lin Fei was just starting to like it. After all, his killer was right in front of him and he could even the score. Therefore, he used the Tiger Fist technique and entered the battle. Two dragon-like techniques collided in the sky, and in a moment it became very light. Seeing such strong techniques, Muguli began to make excuses, saying that this problem had nothing to do with his Mu family. In response, Grandma C pounded her stick on the floor and instructed him to shut up. Muguli didn't understand why she was the one protecting this Lin Fei at first. Ta explained to her son, no matter how much he begged for mercy from the Black Dragons, his family would still be destroyed. And all they have to do is just hope that Lin Fei will win. They fought with all their might, no one spared their strength. Even they had noticed that their abilities were very similar in strength. At the moment of the battle, Pan shouted, "Lai Hu, shout and do it!" It was the deputy head of the Black Dragons. When he turned around, he saw some kid who was heading towards Mu Qingcheng. In addition to Li Hu, two other boys rushed over to protect her. During the battle, he did a somersault and pushed off Pan towards his wife. As he flew towards her, he activated the perfect pulse technique and was covered in like a would-be red fire that gave him good armor. Mu Qingcheng thought that she was already dead and no one would be able to help her in time. But at the last moment, Lin Fei appeared in front of her, taking her right hand and Lu Hu's katana in his left hand. Mu Qingcheng was very happy to see her husband, and then he told her not to worry, because he was around. Lu Hu found it difficult to hold onto the katana, and he was trembling all over. When he looked at his wife, he saw a scratch down to the blood. This only made Lin Fei more angry, and he threatened to kill him. Lu Hu was very scared. But Lin Fei didn't wait for him, because there was still Pan left. So he squeezed his hand, and the katana shattered into small pieces. And then he took him by the neck, and everyone heard not a crunch. Pan couldn't believe that bastard had killed his deputy Li Hu as well. And Grandma never ceased to be amazed at his great strength. He threw his corpse on the floor, and turned around towards the Black Dragon members with the words, "You're here now!" They were all scared after seeing that he had easily killed the deputy head. So they all decided to leave quickly. But then Pan showed his strength, and asked them who had given them permission to run away. Everyone stopped and abruptly fell silent. Lin Fei rushed back to Pan, activating the Emperor Gasification Sword technique. That one was bursting with power, and even his upper garment was torn from such a powerful force. He also activated the Heaven-Tearing Blow. They met head-on again, and there was a great fog all around, through which nothing could be seen. From this smoke, a dragon-shaped force matter appeared and rushed towards Lin Fei. He waved his hand and that dragon was gone, only smoke left behind. Then a huge dragon appeared again and flew at him. And still all these dragons were ruled by Pan. This time, he was right inside that dragon, and activated the Black Dragon Fall technique. And at high speed, he flew straight at it. Lin Fei put out his hands and prepared to repel his strike. Pan hit him straight on, driving him into the ground, and immediately thought he was dead. And so joyfully decided to start the Mu family. The whole family became nervous and afraid of this type, and Mu Qingcheng cried, for she thought her husband was dead. Suddenly the ground began to crack, and Pan couldn't believe why the man was still alive. Then, he came out of the ground completely. His entire suit was torn and ruined, which displeased Lin Fei. When she saw that he was alive, she immediately ran to him. The guards tried to stop Grandma C's granddaughter, but they couldn't hold her back and were afraid to go near those monsters. She hugged him, but he didn't want to, because he was dirty. and today was her grandmother's birthday, and she should be the most beautiful. But she didn't care. It was important for her to hug him and to realize that he was alive and well. Their dramas were interrupted by Pan, who used his trump card by sending a dragon at them. Mu Qingcheng immediately stood behind Lin Fei's back, and with a wave of her hand, she tore that dragon apart. The one couldn't believe that Lin Fei had easily repelled that punch. After that, he realized he was in big trouble. Even with the strength he had, he couldn't resist him. The one stood there for so long that Lin Fei thought that he was already giving up, so he proceeded to take his turn. He ran up to him at a great speed that he didn't even realize. Pan manages to block a jab, but it flies wide of the mark. He caught up to him and activated the Flash of Thunder technique and started beating Pan badly. And when he threw many punches at him, Lin Fei applied all his strength and punched him straight in the face. He was completely unable to continue the fight. So he said that now his life was in his hands, and it was up to him to kill or let him go. Lin Fei decided to seize the moment and wanted to find out who had ordered him to be killed in exchange for his life. Pan didn't believe at first that a monster like him could really let him go if he told him everything. Lin Fei, of course, confirmed his words. Then Pan asked him to lean his ear toward him. And after Pan said who ordered it, Lin Fei was very surprised. Lin Fei asked if the man was lying. Pan assured him that he wouldn't lie in the face of death. Lin Fei thanked him for the information, but unfortunately his life must end here, and took him by the neck while pinning him even more to the ground. When the ladder was crushing him, Pan said that if he killed him, he would not live long. Lin Fei didn't care after all, that person wouldn't catch it. And in a moment, everyone heard the crunch of a neck. Everyone from the Black Dragon was dumbfounded and in a stupor. For their head, Pan had died. Lin Fei turned around to them and ordered them to take this bastard's corpse and get out as soon as possible before he killed them. Those took the corpse and immediately fled for fear of being killed. Mu Qingcheng immediately ran over to him, chewing on how he felt after such a battle. He said that he was fine and not to worry about him. Lin Fei took out a cigarette, but his wife threw the cigarette out of his mouth, saying that smoking is forbidden and that using nicotine will harm his health. He didn't want to fight with his wife, so he listened to her. Mu Guli also came up to him and started yelling at him and getting angry. Mu Qingcheng immediately became forward, defending him, and also asked him not to blame Lin Fei. He angrily shouted to his daughter, explaining that they were now going to destroy the Mu family. Since the master is dead thanks to her Muda, they won't just let them go. Grandma Si entered the conversation again with the words, "Aren't you ashamed?" Mu Guli remained silent. She kindly approached Lin Fei and said that her granddaughter's arm was white wounded, and to begin with, she asked her to help her. And turning back to their son, they went to the room to have a serious talk about today's behavior. In the evening, when Lin Fei and Mu Qingcheng reached home, the latter began to treat her arm. And in time to rag on the wound, Mu Qingcheng asked him why he killed that dude. And he did tell us that it was Pan who killed him. The wife couldn't believe these words. But Lin Fei only added that it was just a weapon carrying out the orders of someone else. She decided it was not fashionable to drop the matter like that, so she went to her grandmother to tell her the truth, and also to find the culprit. Lin Fei decided to keep silent. He must have hidden something. After all, when he was killed that day, he received a text message from him. After thinking on the couch for a bit, he heard strange noises outside, and realized that there was someone out there, on his property. When he went outside, he saw Yun Hong from Yunwu Villa, as well as Master Yun Feili. There were 2 more of his bodyguards with him. It had been a long time since they had seen each other. This time he came at Miss Yun's orders. He didn't feel comfortable talking in Lin Fei's courtyard, so he asked him to follow him to his car and go to Yunwu Villa to talk. Lin Fei didn't mind, but he wanted to tell his wife first. Otherwise, she would be worried if he wasn't here. They, of course, agreed, and began to wait for him. When he went home, he also wrote to Luo Ying that he had to go away for a while on business, and asked him to look after the house discreetly while he was at Yunwu Villa. He also then went to inform his wife of his absence. Half an hour later, they were already outside Yunwu Villa. Ms. Yun was very happy to see Lin Fei again. She didn't want to tell him in advance to take his time to see her. Lin Fei first asked what had happened this time and why he had been brought here. To explain the situation, she asked everyone to leave the auditorium. She then began to tell the request. Namely, she would like to ask him to pretend to be her boyfriend and keep her company at a family event tomorrow. She saw how this really embarrassed Lin Fei and thought that she wasn't very good at being a girl. But that wasn't what bothered him. He didn't realize if there was any connection between this family event and him pretending to be her boyfriend. She began to tell the details that on this day of the family festival, The three branches of the Yun family would gather together to show off their achievements. After gathering, they would decide who would be the future owner of the Yun family. This is only the second gathering this year, but if she loses again, she will be at the mercy of the family and become the support of the family, and she will never have freedom. And many other big families, the Chu family, the Lei family, the Li family, and so on, will also celebrate. Lin Fei was surprised to hear the Lei family on this list, for he knew that this family was the biggest underworld in Jiangbai. He was interested in this family, so without hesitation he agreed. Miss Yun-san was so happy that he agreed. She even hugged him emotionally. She also naturally promised to pay him back. She also asked him if he had any wishes. And he really had a wish. Namely, after the family event was over, he would want Yunwu Villa to cooperate with the Mu family. She didn't understand the cooperation at first, but he told her that he had caused the Mu family and the Black Dragon Society to quarrel earlier. And he is afraid that the Black Dragons will do something bad to hurt the Mu family. And purely physically, he thinks he can't protect them all. Realizing that he wanted Yunwu Mountain Villa to suppress the Black Dragons, it was not beneficial for her. Therefore, she came up with one condition. In return, she wanted Mr. Lin to become the elder of Yunwu Mountain Villa. Lin Fei didn't mind, so he agreed. Miss Yun-san was very happy that he agreed. In a moment, Lin Fei received messages on his phone. Luo Ying texted him, saying that there were suspicious people around his house. So he told Ms. Yun that something was wrong at home and he had to go back to deal with it, so he couldn't stay here anymore. Yun-san immediately offered to send her Yun-hun with him, but he refused, saying that it was a small thing, and it was not worth bothering him at all. He went to his home. After that, she instructed Yun-hong to follow Lin Feem and have him be in the vicinity but not be detected. That one immediately ran after him, and Yun-sanya was excited to be the head of the Yun family. After a while, he was already home and saw Luo Ying sitting in ambush. He approached him without being noticed, and without saying a word put his hand on his shoulder. Luo Ying immediately pulled out a knife, turned around, and waved it sharply before he could see who it was. Lin Fei moved behind his back in a split second and snapped his arm. And as he lay there, he already realized that it was Lin Fei. After Lin Fei asked how the situation was, Luo Ying told him that there are two people and he doesn't know where they are going. He doesn't want to make contact with them, so he can only observe from afar, but after a moment they disappeared. It also seems to him that Lin Fei knows these people. As he spoke, he sensed someone else's aura, so he ran up to the bushes and shouted for them to come out. And there were some really familiar faces there for Lin Fei. Namely, it was the two guys from the Black Dragons, and one of them was Lin Quan. Lin Fei smiled and asked why those came to him again, while mocking Lin Quan, threatening to break his shoulder again. Lin Quan explained to him that he had understood everything correctly. This time, he came to convey the leader's words and invite him to another Black Dragon Society 10 days after the banquet, so that the misunderstanding between the two parties would disappear. He couldn't explain what the activities were, so since she was here, he offered to go there with him now. He agreed to go there, but not until 10 days later for this banquet. After that, they gave the banquet address to the Black Dragon Society, and they went back. Luo Ying didn't realize that Lin Fei had agreed after all. They were from the Black Dragon Society. Lin Fei explained to him that he was a bit curious about who their leader was. After all, he was a mysterious person. And there must be an ulterior motive. Perhaps those even secretly planning revenge. And then Luo Ying told Lin Fei that in his opinion, these people who appeared in the villa earlier are not them at all. He thinks it was the two brothers who intended to attack Yunwu Villa a few days ago, Li Da and Li Xiaoxiao. After thinking for a bit, since he had activities tomorrow, he asked him to stay here and he would also send someone to help him. The next day at Yunwu Villa, he walked onto the arm of Yun-san, who was very beautifully dressed, while Lin Fei himself was wearing a suit. And three guys came up to them, which one of them was Lei Sheng, a young master of one of the 4 largest families. They complimented Ms. Yun that she was beautifully dressed, and also asked who her young boyfriend was. She replied that it was her fiancé whom she loved. As he got closer, he began to remember him. But Lin Fei, with a smile on her face, decided to remind him about the hotel and that he had beaten him there, and that she was the important person in the Chu family. And indeed, he remembered him and was furious. After all, he was looking for him, but he never thought he'd come to him. Last time, he had the chance to let him go, but this time, he wouldn't let Lin Fei leave. Yun-san stood in front of Lin Feem to stop him from doing something stupid and started yelling for help from the guys in the vicinity to stop Lei Sheng and his dogs. Lei Sheng asked Ms. Yun to move away immediately. Even though he is her fiancé, he must be killed. However, an old man interjected into their conversation and said that he would protect Lin Fei if he did anything. It was the same old man Chu Lao that he had met long ago. He told Lei Sheng that they are quite a close relationship and they are good friends. So he asked him to honor the old man and change his decisions. To Lei Sheng, he was a great authority, so of course he changed his mind and left. Old man Chu Lao thanked him, and then Ms. Yun San invited me to join them, to which the old man graciously agreed. At this time, Lei She was furious with his trump, and when the old man leaves, he will kill him. When they sat down together at the table, Chu Lao praised her for finding such a good person. She only blushed a little. After a while, Yun Yangshu, Ms. Yun's older brother, who had even-tempered Lin Fei at Pan's, came over to them. Also with him was his bodyguard He Yao, who was also surplus to Lin Fei. Also when he saw him, he was at a loss as to what he was doing here and why he was alive. Ms. Yun-san told the second brother that he was her boyfriend. The information that he was her boyfriend had him totally freaked out. He asked her if a temperamental girl like her really broke up with Lei's second son. In response, she said that it's all in the past, and now she and Lei Sheng are just friends. Lin Fei also lashed out at his bodyguard, saying that he apparently didn't learn the lesson Lin Fei had taught him well last time. He Yao was infuriated by this and ducked at him, with his master instructing him to stop. This only made Lin Fei happy after all. This was what he wanted. At the last moment, he grabbed him by the neck, while not even blinking. He Yao couldn't believe it. After all, not that much time had passed. Then his true energy had become so terrifyingly strong. Yun Yangshu asked to let the Black Panther go. After all, he was also from the Yun family. Lin Fei didn't have this in mind, justifying his decision. Then he started it first, and he did so everywhere he went. Yun Changlun, Chief Master Yun, came up to them and said, "Who dare praise the Yun family?" Yun Sun immediately began to justify herself to him, saying that it was just a misunderstanding, and even old man Chu Lao could confirm it. She also ran up to Lin Fei and asked him to let go. He listened to her and let her go, as he wants to ruin her reputation. Yun Changlun, seeing that he had let him go, believed that it was a misunderstanding after all and left the place, while reminding her that if she loses again this year, the Lei family will be her home. Lin Fei, on the other hand, was happy to meet Yun Changlun. Yun Changlun's words infuriated Yun Sun, and she vowed to herself not to become part of the Lei family. After a while, the head of the Yun family as well as Yun San's father, Go Tao Yun, beckoned everyone to join the Yun family's grand celebration. After the invitation, he went to his daughter Yun San and said that he had read the report of what had happened at the villa in the Yunwu Mountains, and he was very dissatisfied, and without waiting for a reply went. She shouted back at him that she could elevate the Yun family to the top 3 in Jiangbaye. He turned around and couldn't believe she'd said that. And then Yun Yangshu walked up to him and said that Lei's family was waiting for him there. Therefore, he told Yun San that those would burn later. At this time, Chu Lao and Lin Fei were chatting at the table, and the old man noticed that the latter had become many times stronger. Lin Fei, on the other hand, couldn't say that about the old man. It was obvious that his condition was deteriorating, and it was true. But the old man was surprised how he knew it because he had not been told about it. He thought he was also a doctor. But it's a pity he can't get rid of this disease, and he won't live long, and Lin Fei most likely knows how to cure it. To which the old man was surprised and began to listen to him attentively. But to do that, he needs his help in one small matter. He asked for help introducing himself to Yun Konglun. After some time, he approached Yun Konglun on the street, and the latter asked whom he wanted to introduce. Lin Fei stepped out of the shadows. He was not happy to see him. And then old man Chu Lao left the place, giving the youths a chance to talk in private. Yun Changlun asked what he wanted that he even involved the old man. He asked if the man knew who Lao Pan was, to which he said he didn't know. Before he died, Lao Pan told Lin Fei that he was ordered by the Yun family's grandson, Yun Changlun. Yun Changlun didn't like this type. After all, he had called him out because of this nonsense, and also told him that Yun San would lose anyway. As he left, Lin Fei clarified that Lao Pan was the master of the Black Dragon community. This information interested him and he stopped and started listening to it. He told him that Lao Pan had recently wanted to massacre his family, and before he died, he told him that he was behind it all. This infuriated him for saying such a thing, and he ran at him to punch him with his fist. Lin Fei easily stopped his punch. He only praised him, because he didn't expect him to be capable. And apparently his sister had chosen him for a reason. Yun Konglun saw that he was not a stupid person, so he asked why he believed the words of the rascal. Lin Fei didn't really believe him. Lin Fei wanted to tell him that someone had planted evidence on him. Yun Kanglun said that he didn't care and left. This was not Lin Fei's main concern. After all, the process had been set in motion, and he had probably left to investigate. After a while, Yun Changlun called Yun Yangshu into his office. He praised him, for Yun Yangshu had become bolder. He became agitated, and began to make excuses that there had been some misunderstanding. He then asked if he knew the name Lao Pan. He was in complete shock and stupor. Yun Changlun saw his reaction, and realized that this was most likely the truth that Lin Fei was talking about. Yun Yangshu started yelling in an uncertain, striving voice, "Brother, someone is lying to you, don't believe it." Yun Qinglun put his hand on his shoulder and asked what the man was panicking about. After all, he had just said the person's name. He felt sorry for him, and this time he would forget the case. However, next time, he wouldn't get off that easily. Yun Yangshu was completely frightened and sweat was running from his forehead. Afterward, he left the study, leaving Yun Yangshu alone there, and also instructed him to take care of Yun-san so that his father would not find out anything. Yun Yangshu went to the rotunda to make a phone call, and arranged with someone to have those done at the highest level. After the conversation, he was very angry at Yun Changlun and promised to pin him against the wall someday. At this time, Lin Fei stood behind him and overheard his conversation, and he wasn't very happy if these two finished the introduction. He was also then approached by Yun-san. She wanted him to meet her father. At this time, the head of the Lei family, Lei Quan, as well as the head of the Yun family, Go Tao Yun, were talking in the hall, for they hadn't seen each other for months. Lei Quan had heard that young Miss Yun-san had some difficulties in managing the villa. Go Tao Yun only joked that it was difficult for girls to manage the villa, so he also asked what he thought about the marriage they had talked about earlier, and his son would be fine with that. And he didn't mind, and he was ready to marry them at that moment. But here was Yun-san herself against it, who entered this hall and started yelling at her father for deciding her fate for her. And they agreed that he would give him time, and she asked Lin Fei to be her guarantor. Lei Sheng was furious because he didn't understand how he had the nerve to come here. The father saw that his son was not getting along well with this guy and asked him what their problems were. He told his father that he was the one who had insulted him back then at the hotels, and now he wanted revenge on the bastard. Lei Quan asked Go Tao Yun what this was all about, and why he was meeting his enemies in his territory. Go Tao Yun began to apologize, and would settle this matter right away. Yun Shen stood in front of him and told him not to touch Lin Fei. After all, he was her young man. He is also an elder at her Yunwu villa. Go Tao Yun didn't expect such insolence from his daughter, on his own property. He also said that he hadn't seen this information in her report on Yunwu villa. She walked over to him and whispered something in his ear, explaining the situation. While they were talking, Lei Sheng approached Lin Fei and told him that he would die immediately after the party ended, and no one would be able to help him. He laughed at such promises from a scum like him. Last time he hadn't even managed to scratch or hurt him, but this time he was stronger, and he didn't stand a chance. This really pissed off Lei Sheng, and he ran at him with his fists, without waiting for the party to end. But at the last moment, he was stopped by Go Tao Yun and asked him to calm down. Lin Fei didn't even have to do anything himself. He asked him to leave here because he remembered that he had some other family matters to attend to. Lei Quan asked his son to leave. After all, he wanted to ruin his relationship with the Mu family through some kid. Gritting his teeth, he agreed. All three sat down at the table and began to dialogue. Yun-san wanted to convince her father with Lin Fei's strength. After all, she was sure that in 3 months, their Yun family could become one of the first in the server. Her father grinned and hesitated, wondering if he could match her second brother's stratum. Ta shouted, "He can," with great confidence, for she had seen his power in battle, and never before did she recall such a thing. Go Tao Yun saw that the one with great confidence and not sure. Therefore, he still wants to give Lin Fei a chance to show his strength today. He should try to perform in the family banquet ring tonight. Yun-san was sure that he would have to beg him to do it, but he volunteered and didn't mind stretching himself. Afterward, he told them to leave and Lin Fei to get ready to enter the ring. For Go Tao Yun, this was interesting to watch, because even old man Chu Lao dared to insult the Lei family by calling out this brat, and he couldn't wait to see how good he was. After they left Go Tao Yun's office, Yun Xian started to apologize. She was very sorry. After all, she only wanted to introduce him to her father, and didn't expect him to drag him into the family banquet ring at all. But Lin Fei reassured her. He understood everything, and since they were partners, he would easily take part in this. After that, he asked her for a short time away from her. Yun Xian was upset because she didn't think he only saw her as a partner. She loves him, but he ignores her even though he knows he's married. At this time at the banquet, Yun Kanglun was approached by Yun Yangshu. He asked him to move to a more private place, for he had some very important information. When they stepped back, he told them that Lin Fei would be participating in the family banquet ring. And he didn't understand why it was his father who allowed Lin Fei to participate in this event. But then he guessed that it looked like he was supporting his sister. Lin Fei had just gone to see old man Chu Lao. He asked if he had resolved the matter with Yun Chang Lun, but how could the matter not be resolved if Chu Lao himself helped? Lin Fei also said that it was impossible to delay his treatment, and it would be necessary to examine the old man, so he asked when he could get out for a checkup. Without replying, someone launched a kunai from the bushes towards the old man, but Lin Fei in a split second repelled that kunai. Then, a man wearing a hooded cloak came out of the bushes. Lin Fei saw him for the first time, but the old man knew him and couldn't believe that he had come for him. When the old man asked what he was doing here, he said he was just following orders and nothing personal. It didn't occur to him who wanted to take his life so badly. He also advised against the boys getting involved in his work. But since Lin Fei likes to get involved in other people's affairs, he of course stayed. And plus this old man Lu Chao had done a lot for him, so he couldn't leave him. This killer didn't like this kid's arrogance, so he promised to kill him no matter what it cost him. Since he didn't know his opponent, Lin Fei thought that if he attacked first and unexpectedly, he would have a better chance of dealing with him. This assassin, like everyone else, noticed that he was young, but he had such a high cultivation level. Old man Chu Lao asked him not to underestimate this person, for he was not as simple as he seemed at first glance. But he did not care, and he ran at him again, for he was sure of his strength. For this assassin, it was only to his advantage he activated the Heavenly Elephant Force technique, and from his hands, it was as if a huge elephant made of force matter had appeared. Lin Fei wasn't a bad guy either, and activated the Thunder Tiger technique, and they faced each other again in close combat.
For this assassin, this whole situation was very strange. Because even after all this, he can't determine his level, although it can be seen that his strength is very large and powerful.
At this moment, all the people had already run up, as well as Yun San, who was worried about him. The situation was not on the assassin's side, since there were many witnesses and a strong opponent. He decided to retreat, but promised to definitely face Lin Fei again. And afterwards, he disappeared in a second without leaving a trace. Yun San immediately ran up to him and asked him how he was feeling and if he was injured. He was fine, except he wondered what the Ha type was. So he asked the old man who it was. He didn't go into details, but to him he was more than just an acquaintance. Yun Shin demanded to say who it was. After all, they were fighting in the Yun family's territory, and she should inform her father, and that way they could help him. Old man Chu Lao thanked him for his help, but he refused. After all, this was only his business, and he already knows what to do next. Lin Fei also said not to worry, and said that he would look after Mr. Chu, and she could quietly go on with the banquet. After some time, they were alone on the street, and he asked him to tell him everything he knew about the man, and why they wanted to kill him. But the old man did not want to involve him in the case, because it had nothing to do with him. But Lin Fei remembered his kindness, as well as the jade he had given him last time, and it had helped him a lot. Now that he was in trouble, he couldn't just sit idly by. He convinced him, and began to tell the story that his name was Gu Yu, and he was from the Zong family, and was also a member of the Shadow Hall. Lin Fei couldn't even think that there was a clan superior to Lada Chu Lao. The reason why they want to kill him is Lin Fei himself. To be more precise, the reason was because of the very blazing spirit jade that the old man had given him the first time he met him. It was one of the two main treasures of the Chu clan, but unfortunately, he won't be able to bring him back, because he absorbed the jade to pump his powers. The old man was shocked, for he knew that the jade energy was frighteningly large, and how he could swallow it in such a short time he had no idea. On the other hand, it was certain he was a man worth his trust after such a thing. It scared him, so he asked him not to do it again. But he also promised to get another treasure in return if he did something. Lin Fei had no idea what he would offer this time if last time he had given him a jade that was very valuable to his clan. The old man took out a thunder pearl from his pocket. It contained tremendous thunder-rolling energy, and with it, one could greatly improve one's cultivation. That person even froze when he saw it, for he never expected to see such a treasure like this from Chu Lao. And with the words, "Master Chu, my problems don't discriminate me by talking about horns," agreed to help him. He asked to protect a man who was very dear to him. The man asked if he was afraid to put this person under his protection. The old man said with pride and confidence that always believed in him, especially after such a run-in. That person was his granddaughter, who is only 10 years old. She is his only one, as her mother passed away in childbirth and his son died in a car accident last year. And he is very afraid that the Zong clan might harm his family, especially his granddaughter. Lin Fei swore that he wouldn't even let anyone touch her granddaughter. After all, her fate now depended on him. He also gave him an envelope, inside which has information about his granddaughter, as well as a special token pass of his Chu family. This envelope said her name was Chu Yi, age 10, a photo, and the address was Jiangbei Royal Primary School, and it was very close to Lin Fei University. Also, the old man advised not to treat her like an ordinary child, or else he would regret it, for she was an extraordinary child. At this time, Go Taoyun was already spouting words in the arena. He thanked first of all for the support of his Yun family, everyone present. He was also happy to welcome everyone to the annual feast as part of his clan. Yun San stood in the crowd and looked around, for Lin Fei still hadn't come, and her fate all depended on him. Yun Yangshu noticed this and started making fun of her because Mr. Lin Fei didn't come. He also said that relying on him was too stupid an idea. Yun Xian asked him to speak matter-of-factly or to get off her back. Yun Yangshu revealed that Master Gitu would come out to fight against him. In the previous year's competition, he had never fielded a top 3 master. But this time, Gitu himself would participate, and apparently his brother would see Lin Fei lose. That means that she would be crushed in this Golu, and she wouldn't have the slightest chance. And he also assumed that Lin Fei had found out about it and must have run away. After a few seconds, Lin Fei himself came up to her. She already thought that he had really run away. But after all, he remembered his promise, and as long as she did not become the head of the Yun family, then he would not leave. At this moment, his wife Mu Qingcheng spotted him from far away with this girl, but she did not dare to approach him yet, just watching him. He did get the feeling that someone was watching him, but he didn't notice anyone. The referee welcomed everyone to the Yun family's annual family party. He also reminded everyone that the rules of the duel remain unchanged. Each of the children of the Yun family can present up to 3 competitors. The duel is one-on-one. The winner is the one who defeats all the competitors. And with the words, "Let's not drag this out. The annual family ring opens right now." He opened the ring. And in the first bout, Yun Yangshun's representative Yun Yangshun, Black Panther, and Yun Kang Lun's participant Liu Wangdao would meet. Elder brother gave a lot of money to get Liu Wangdao to participate. The two of them entered the ring. Liu Wangdao remarked that if he sent the Black Panther into the ring, it was problematic for him to hire someone. Black Panther only laughed and asked him not to be upset if he took him down in a couple seconds. After the fight was announced, the Black Panther immediately jumped away from him, keeping a great distance. But Liu Wangdao stood to himself, accelerating with great speed and also activating the ripping fist technique. He struck directly at him, which created a large fog through which he could not be seen. A hand suddenly appeared out of the mist and grabbed his face. And then Liu Wangdao sealed him with all his strength right into the ground, with that one not hurting him at all. The Black Panther was out, and foam was coming out of his mouth. Yun Yangxiu was furious, for he had lost. Yun Xin began to feel a little worried about Lin Fei. After all, Liu Wangdao was indeed an outstanding and strong fighter. Lin Fei wasn't worried at all. He knew that he would have brought him to his knees alone. As he watched the fight, he again felt that he was being watched, and when he turned around, he saw a familiar face. When O stood up a little to look closer, he saw his wife Mu Qingcheng. He approached her and asked her what she was even doing here. It was a coincidence, really, and she hadn't even thought she'd meet him here. Yun Qian walked over to the two of them and met Lin Fei's wife for the first time. They both started chatting sweetly and also exchanging compliments, you could say typical girls. Lin Fei asked Ms. Yun to speak to his wife in private. Lin Fei asked Ms. Yun to talk to his wife in private, but she asked him not to stay long because he was about to enter the ring. When they had already left, Yun San had never even thought that his wife Mu Qingcheng would come here. And now we can only hope that she didn't come here to influence him. When Lin Fei and Mu Qingcheng stepped back, she said that she had come with her father to attend the Yun family festival. She also wondered what he had with that girl. Lin Fei began to explain that she had misunderstood, and that they were just partners, and he just needs to win for her in the family ring, in return for a nice bonus. But their conversation was interrupted by Yunxia saying that it was over much faster than she could have imagined. Liu Wangdoa had already dealt with her members and all of the second brother's representatives, and her last trump card that was left was him. Afterward, he kissed his wife, and also promised that they would go home together after the Yun family festival was over. In the back of her mind, she hoped he wasn't lying and everything would be okay. The judge was already on the stage, and even he didn't expect this event to be held at such a breakneck speed. one single young master's representative was able to defeat the 5 participants of the second young master and the third mistress. Mu Qingcheng's was a little delayed, and her father was not pleased. After all, they had come here to talk about cooperation, so he asked her not to cause trouble. He also asked about Lin Fei, and peacefully, ever since he got his ability, he had been missing a lot. He had the feeling that he didn't care about the Mu family anymore. The judge further started to speak. After all, one must cheer up the crowd of people somehow. He began to praise Liu Wangdal that he was so strong, scaring away even the last participant of the third mistress. And come to think of it, today's events were the fastest in the history of the celebration. And finally, Lin Fei still came to the stages, who of course apologized to everyone and said that he just had some difficulties that urgently needed to be resolved. When he entered the ring, Mu Qingcheng's father Mu Qingcheng was shocked at what he was doing here. At this time, the old man suggested to Head Yun betting if Lin Fei was participating in the ring. He bet that Lin Fei could defeat Wang Dal in 15 seconds. Seeing the very great confidence on his face, he was reluctant to draw and declined his offer. Head Lei, on the other hand, scattered from him and placed a bet that Wang Dao would defeat this kid in 15 seconds. But if they are arguing, it is necessary to come up with a winner. And old man Chu Lao proposed to bet, since he was so interested, and bet the treasure of the Chu family, the Thunder Pearl. That one hesitated a bit. But after looking at this skinny kid, he didn't want to be stingy and place the heavenly jade. And then they shook hands. The old man shouted to Lin Fei that they had made a deal with Mr. Lei that he could defeat the opponent in 15 seconds. He bet the Thunder Pearl he had promised him, and that heavenly jade. So he told him to do his best and not to let him down. Realizing that his Thunder Pearl would have to be fought for, he was very serious. Liu Wangdal didn't wait for this stump to move and ran towards it. Lin Fei looked at him with his eyes, and just from the sight of him, he lost control of his body, and he didn't understand how such a thing was even possible. Afterwards, Lin Fei found himself primo behind his back, and the latter didn't even have time to react. Vandal quickly waved his hand behind him, but he was no longer there. Though he wants to play with it for a while, he doesn't have much time left. So he reappeared in front of him and punched him with his fist, right in his face. He hit him so hard he broke the ring. He asked how much time had passed since the fight with the referee. He looked at his watch and said 13 seconds, and he was shocked, for he had not expected such a turn of events. The old man won after all, and he asked for a fair reward. Chief Lei said that after the match is over, he will be given his winnings. Big Brother wasn't happy at all. He ordered his fighter Gitu to put a stop to it. It was the same kid who had attacked the old man back then, and would have killed him if not for Lin Fei, who happened to be nearby. The older brother wanted to make sure that he left no stone unturned. When the referee only waved the start of the fight, Guitu instantly ran towards him. He appeared on the left side in front of his face, and activated the Afterlife Strike technique, and it was as if a skeleton with a sword appeared around him. Guitu praised him, for it turns out he was the third person who was able to repel his Afterlife Strike technique. After standing for a moment, he suddenly appeared on top of Lin Fei's back and activated the Ghost Moon Strike technique. He started to take the hit and only just bounced away from it, and abruptly activated the Sword Control technique. Guitu was glad to meet him, for it had been a long time since he had met a worthy opponent, and from that, his desire to take over his life only grows. For Lin Fei, this was already the norm, for there were many people in this world who were eager to kill him, and as long as he walks around alive, healthy, Lin Fei activated the Thunder Shadow technique when he saw that bastard rushing at him, and thus he created clones with swords, but with Gitu's technique, he managed to grab him by the neck, after which he even got upset, for he expected more from him, and squeezed his neck, from which he disappeared. Lin Fei wanted to play hide-and-seek with him, using his clones. The head of the Lei family laughed at this guy, hoping to defeat Gitu. This way is very foolish. The old man told him not to go to the front, only to wait, and then he would see Lin Fei's true strength. For Chief Yun, it was also obvious that Guitu was stronger than Lin Fei, but he didn't understand why old man Chu Lao was so calm about him. He only had one thought, that he had not used all of his strength. The older brother from the podium started shouting at Gitu to come already and use secret skills. He felt sorry for him. He wanted to play with him more, but orders are orders. So he jumped on him and activated the secret technique, 7-Star Devil Blade. This was what Lin Fei wanted. He wanted to see this strange man's secret skills. In response, he used the Sword Control in the Air technique. Then he added the technique, Return of 1,000 Swords, and a bunch of swords appeared around him. Then Yin and Yang appeared in front of him, from which a huge, fiery tiger emerged. Guitu was even startled for a moment, but quickly pulled himself together. And then he started to get more and more interested in this fight. He activated his secret skill, 7 Devil Emperor Blades, again. And a huge undead with sword and armor appeared. They collided head-on, and a column of smoke rose around them. Chief Yun was surprised that this brat was able to reach a level that was not inferior to Gitu's strength. Even if he were to lose this battle, he would be very eager to poach Lin Fei to his side. In the moment of battle, Gitu managed to grab him and slam him to the ground. After he suffered his blow, he thought it was Lin Fei's true body. He grabbed his arm, and then the rest of the clones attacked him. Thus, he trapped him. But it was weak for him, and he destroyed all the clones with ease. That got to him, and he decided to end this fight quickly. In a split second, he was in front of him and managed to punch Lin Fei right in his face, and did so to all the clones. There was one last body left in this ring, and he assumed it was the real him. So he ran towards him and grabbed him by the neck. It is forbidden to kill the opponent according to the rules of the ring, but since the boss had already ordered him, he has no choice to spare him. Lin Fei instructed him to let him go immediately, for this was now his last chance. Guitu only laughed, for the situation was in his hands, and he didn't understand why he was threatening him, so he squeezed his neck. Everyone was worried about him and couldn't believe he was dead and lost. Only Head Lei was very happy about it. But in the end, it turned out to be a fake, too. He started looking in all directions around him and yelling for him to come out. Lin Fei appeared out of nowhere in front of him and struck him, nailing his armor. He fell down and blood gushed from his mouth. His wife even cried, but when she saw him alive and well, there was no limit to her joy. Lin Fei was approached by his older brother and said that he would fight him now. But his father stopped him, saying that he was the host, and to challenge a guest to a fight was a low act. He was not disappointed. Also wanted to keep him away from Lin Fei, for he realized that it was the truest monster. And in the end, the judge declared Lin Fei the winner, also told everyone that he was the elder of Cloud Mist Villa. The owner of the villa is Mrs. Yun Fei Xian, Mu Qingcheng's father. Mu Qingcheng was furious at Lin Fei's act. After all, he doesn't understand how come he became the Yun family's oldest villa. Lin Fei walked over to Yun Xian and asked if he had fulfilled the set rear, and also suggested that their partnership was resolved. She can now officially declare that the Mu family is her partner from now on. The head of the Yun family then came up to him and praised him for having such great strength at such a young age. He was also warmly welcomed into the Yun family. He also told his daughter to take good care of him and to come up to him afterward. After he completed his tasks, he asked to leave. Then the second brother came up to her already and congratulated her sarcastically, and also reminded her that she had passed dearly to their older brother, and now she had to live very carefully. Lin Fei walked over to his wife, Mu Qingcheng, and complimented her beauty. At that, his father didn't expect that he knew Miss Yun, and that he was now the elder of Cloud Mist Villa. He said that they met quite by chance, and he decided to help her. In return, he became a temporary elder. This made Mu Qingcheng's father very confused, and although he recognized that he is a capable and very strong guy, but still he gives two vague answers. He also asked if he was cheating on his wife. Mu Qingcheng herself came to his defense, because she believed that he and Yun Xian had a purely business relationship. She asked him to trust him as she did. Father asked what ate siu they have no mutual benefit. Then their cooperation is surely more than just a business relationship. Mu Qingcheng asked to explain everything to her father. The man said not to worry, and he had a plan to convince her father. This already at least interested him, after all. It was hard to make him believe in anything, especially Lin Fei. First, he offered to make a very simple wager. Lin Fei offered to put his position as the head of the Mu family on the line. If he could prove to him that his feelings for his daughter were sincere, he would have to make Mu Qingcheng the head of the Mu clan. And if he loses, he will give up the Chu family's pearl, as well as the Lei clan's jade.